Chapter 451. Let's go. Yihao grabbed Zixing, and immediately flew away. Rumble. Suddenly, an earth-shaking sound came from behind them. It could be seen that the old woman was quite angry and was venting the anger in her heart. Little One, it's up to you. Yihao immediately summoned Little One. Little One directly shot into the depths of the magical beast forest. Ding dong. Congratulations to host for killing a Class 7 magical beast. Congratulations to host for obtaining 700,000 experience points. Congratulations to host for obtaining 70,000 soul points. Ding dong. Congratulations to host for killing a Class 6 magical beast. Congratulations to host for obtaining 60,000 experience points. Congratulations to host for obtaining 6,000 soul points. Ding dong. Congratulations to host for killing a Class 8 magical beast. Congratulations to host for obtaining 8 million experience points. Congratulations to host for obtaining 800,000 soul points. After a while, the sound in Yihao's mind kept ringing. Little One was crazily hunting magical beasts, because Yihao knew that the old woman would not let him off so easily. She might even be following behind him at this moment. At this moment, he did not have any trump cards. If he let Zixing go, he would be in danger. At this moment, Yihao could only hope that Little One could hunt more magical beasts. At that time, he would be able to summon a martial god expert and make the old woman kneel at his feet and sing a song of conquest. You have to let me go, Zixing asked coldly. No hurry, Yihao replied softly. Just like that, he flew around the forest with Zixing. You scoundrel. Zixing did not expect that Yihao would still not let go of her. If Yihao did not let go of her, the old woman behind him would not be able to attack. Zixing glared at Yihao angrily, but Yihao did not pay attention to her at all. When your martial arts power is exhausted, I will personally deal with you. Yihao was flying now, and flying also consumed martial arts power. When Yihao's martial arts power was exhausted, Yihao would naturally not be her match. Thinking of this, Zixing was in a good mood. However, after flying for more than 2 hours, Zixing couldn't help but frown. Why does it seem like we're going in circles? Zixing looked at Yihao, but she suppressed the confusion in her heart. She wanted nothing more than to kill Yihao. She wouldn't ask Yihao anything. What the hell is this son of a bitch doing? The old woman, who was following Yihao from afar, couldn't help but frown. Little One, you're awesome. Yihao kept praying in his heart. Half a day had already passed, and his soul points had already risen to over 70 million. In the beginning, the increase was rather fast. However, perhaps because too many magical beasts had been killed, the system's notifications were far less frequent than before. In the first minute, it rang several times, but now it would only ring once every few minutes. 100 million soul points were required to summon a martial god expert. Most importantly, the martial god expert summoned by the 100 million soul points was only a random low-level martial god expert. In other words, the summoned martial god realm experts. They would appear randomly between the first and third order martial gods. This was also the reason why Yihao didn't use soul points to directly upgrade an existing general, because upgrading an existing general would directly fix their cultivation at the first order martial god realm. At this time, a first-order martial god was obviously not enough to fight a third-order martial god, old woman. Therefore, Yihao was trying to buy time to quickly accumulate 100 million experience points to summon a martial god expert. One day, are you done? We've been flying for a day, and you're just going in circles. Is there any meaning to it? 2 days. Hey, are you mute? 3 days. Can you let go of me? My time is precious. 8 days. At this time, Yihao had been flying for 8 days with her in tow. They had been flying around in the forest like a headless fly. Zixing couldn't figure out what Yihao was doing. At this time, she couldn't be bothered to talk to Yihao because she knew that even if she spoke to Yihao, Yihao wouldn't pay attention to her. It's about time. After flying for 8 days, Yihao was already exhausted. However, there was a third-order martial god behind him who was staring at him like a poisonous snake. He couldn't relax at all. In this day, there were only 4 or 5 notifications in his mind. It was obvious that most of the surrounding demonic beasts had been killed by Little One. In order not to arouse the old woman's suspicion, Yi Hao brought Xing as far away from Little One as possible. Ding dong, congratulations to the host for killing a 7th order demonic beast. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 700,000 experience points. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 70,000 soul points. Enough. Yi Hao was overjoyed. However, before he could finish, the system notification sounded again. Ding dong. Congratulations to the host. Little One's cultivation has broken through. He is now a 2nd order martial god. Little One actually broke through. Yi Hao was a little surprised to hear that Little One had broken through to the 2nd order martial god. This divine beast was indeed abnormal. As long as it killed, its cultivation could break through. Yi Hao rejoiced inwardly. This kind of existence was his subordinate. If it was the subordinate of an evil person, the consequences would be unimaginable. Host, I want to summon. Yi Hao immediately said to the system. Ding dong. Do you wish to spend 100 million soul points to summon a martial god expert? Yes. Ding dong. Congratulations to the host for summoning Zhuge Liang. He is now a 3rd order martial god. What? Zhuge Liang? Yi Hao was surprised to hear Zhuge Liang. Can Zhuge Liang do it? One had to know that Zhuge Liang was a strategist in history. Would he be able to do it in this world of martial arts? Fortunately, Zhuge Liang was a 3rd order martial god. If he was a 1st order martial god, Yi Hao would probably cry himself to death. Kongming greets the Lord. Zhuge Liang, dressed in white, held a feather fan in his hand and bowed to Yi Hao with a smile. As expected, Zhuge Liang was also a young man. Looking at Zhuge Liang's scholarly aura, Yi Hao really doubted whether Zhuge Liang could do it. Lord, look at Kongming. Seeing that Yi Hao was at his wit's end, Zhuge Liang smiled and suddenly waved his fan forward. Rumble. A powerful force surged in the direction of the old woman. Who are you? Seeing the powerful force coming towards her, the old woman's face changed. So smart, so strong. She saw that Zhuge Liang could guess her predicament without her saying anything. Moreover, Yi Hao could feel that the force Zhuge Liang displayed was the strength of a 3rd order martial god. It seemed like the system was very fair when it came to strength. However, Yi Hao started to worry about what would happen next. After all, the generals he summoned all had fighting skills, but Zhuge Liang did not. The old woman quickly recovered from her shock. However, she was surprised that a 3rd order martial god realm master would appear out of nowhere without her noticing it all. Chapter 452. Liangzi, you have to do your best. Seeing the old woman flip out, Yi Hao immediately grabbed Xing and left the battlefield. He was really worried for Zhuge Liang. However, Zhuge Liang seemed to have expected it. He easily dodged it and waved his feather fan with a smile. He actually dodged it. Seeing the old woman's attack miss, Yi Hao and Xing were surprised. Let's see if you can still dodge it. Seeing Zhuge Liang easily dodge it, the old woman was stunned and attacked Zhuge Liang even faster. Xiao Yi, you go too. Seeing Xiao Yi return, Yi Hao immediately instructed Xiao Yi. The old woman's expression changed. What the hell is this? Get lost. Then, the old woman attacked Xiao Yi with her palm. Zhuge Liang suddenly snorted and waved the feather fan in his hand, attacking the old woman. The old woman felt a strong sense of danger and had no choice but to withdraw her attack and try her best to dodge Zhuge Liang's attack. How is this possible? Xing's expression changed again and again. Her eyes were filled with shock as she looked at Zhuge Liang. The old woman's heart was the same, because she realized that Zhuge Liang could only use the basic martial arts power but could not use martial arts. It was as if Zhuge Liang did not know martial arts at all. Moreover, Zhuge Liang's realm was the same as hers. Logically speaking, it should be easy for her to kill Zhuge Liang. But the more she fought, the more she fought. She was anxious, and the more she fought, the more powerless she became. Because no matter how she attacked, Zhuge Liang seemed to be able to predict it and easily dodge it. Moreover, She had to guard against Xiao, Yi, and Zhuge Liang's simultaneous attacks. No, if this continues, I'll be finished. The old woman thought anxiously, and Zhuge Liang seemed to be able to see through her thoughts. He attacked unhurriedly and was able to dodge the old woman's attack 100% of the time. Moreover, when the old woman wanted to attack Xiao Yi, Zhuge Liang would always be able to help Xiao Yi resolve the crisis at the critical moment. Could it be that he can see through other people's thoughts? Zixing frowned as she thought. Xia, how about we reconcile? Zixing saw that the old woman was at a disadvantage and was extremely anxious. She hesitated for a moment and spoke. Yi Hao ignored her and sneered in his heart. Now that they were at a disadvantage, they finally knew that they had to reconcile. What were they doing before? Moreover, Yi Hao believed that if he did not summon the martial god and waited until his power was exhausted, Zixing would not let him off easily. Seeing that Yi Hao was silent, Zixing was even more displeased. She swore that if she could survive, she would make Yi Hao die a horrible death. And that girl, she actually dared to compete with him for the deity position. She simply didn't know what was good for her. However, in order to survive, Zixing had no choice but to lower her attitude. Tell me, what will it take for you to let us go? Miss Zixing, this isn't an attitude for discussion. Yi Hao chuckled. You, Zixing, stamped the ground in anger, hating Yi Hao so much that she gritted her teeth. If you want to discuss it with me, you have to apologize to me first and show a friendly attitude. Yi Hao chuckled. Yi Hao was also very angry. It was one thing for Zixing, to pretend to be ZMO, to deceive him. If not for the fact that he was a 4th-level martial saint, he would probably have died in Zixing's hands. Yi Hao naturally would not let Zixing off so easily. You want me to apologize? Dream on. Zixing said with a cold expression. What a joke. Who was she? She was a proud daughter of the heavens. She had always been high and mighty, an existence respected by billions of people. Moreover, in the future, she would control the Purple Heaven Divine Kingdom. If she apologized to Yi Hao, it would be the biggest stain on her. Therefore, she absolutely could not tolerate a stain on her. All right. Yi Hao shrugged, looking indifferent, because he was confident that he would let this arrogant woman know what was wrong. What are you trying to do? Zixing suddenly felt a large hand pinching her buttocks and moving around her buttocks. Zixing shuddered and her entire body stiffened. I'm warning you, don't do anything rash. Zixing warned with a trembling voice. You pervert, hooligan, stop it. Zixing shouted desperately. However, Yi Hao did not seem to hear her. His hand continued to move around Zixing's buttocks. Needless to say, this arrogant woman still had a lot of meat on her buttocks. Yi Hao thought to himself, let go of the princess, little bastard, or you will die a horrible death. Hearing Zixing's voice, the old woman looked over. Take care of yourself first. Suddenly, Zhuge Liang's voice rang in the old woman's ears. The old woman was shocked, but it was too late. Zhuge Liang's feather fan and small one's attack had already landed on her body. Puffed. The old woman spat out a mouthful of blood, and her entire body flew backward. However, Zhuge Liang and Small One would not let go of this opportunity. They immediately chased after her and attacked again. Puffed. The old woman spat out another mouthful of blood. If it was only a light injury at the beginning, it was now an injury on top of an injury. I was wrong. Seeing the old woman's miserable state and Yi Hao's hand on her body, she could not tolerate it. What did you say? I didn't hear you. Yi Hao sneered and said deliberately. You. Zixing felt like she was about to explode from anger. However, she could not do anything to Yi Hao, this rascal. She could only shout loudly, I was wrong. After shouting these 3 words, Zixing was like a defeated rooster. She finally lowered her proud head. That's more like it. With a slap, Yi Hao slapped Zixing's buttocks and then let go of her. Yi Hao clapped his hands. Seeing this scene, Zixing was completely furious. She had been taken advantage of, and she had not said anything. What did Yi Hao mean by this? After taking advantage of her, he still despised her? If that was not the case, why would Yi Hao clap his hands? I'm going to kill you. Zixing, or want to take out her purple star divine sword. But she realized that the purple star divine sword had already been snatched away by Yi Hao. Zixing, could only randomly find a long sword and stab it at Yi Hao. Yi Hao frowned. He thought to himself that this woman was really asking for a beating. She could not be compared to Zmo at all. Yi Hao's figure flashed and once again snatched Zixing's long sword. This time, he held Zixing's waist. What are you doing? Zixing panicked again. Only then did she remember that she was no match for Yi Hao. Wasn't this asking for trouble? Zixing was really afraid that Yi Hao would go berserk and do something bad to her. Chapter 453. Feeling the burning pain on her buttocks, Zixing could not help but feel embarrassed and angry. When had she ever suffered such humiliation? He did not hold back. He raised his hand and spanked Zixing's buttocks dozens of times. This was already considered light in Yi Hao's eyes. What a joke. This woman had tried to kill him time and time again. What was this little lesson to her? If not for the fact that Zixing was Zmo's sister, Yi Hao would not have let Zixing off so easily. How dare you point your sword at me? Smack. How dare you be so arrogant? Smack. It's good if you're as sensible as your sister. Smack. Before Yi Hao could finish his sentence, he had already spanked Zixing's round buttocks. Zixing gritted her teeth tightly at this moment. She felt extremely wronged in her heart, and her tears fell uncontrollably. She was a goddess, the beloved daughter of the purple heaven divine emperor, a goddess who was doted on by everyone. When had she ever suffered such humiliation? Moreover, she was spanked by a man. This was equivalent to directly wiping out her halo. She swore in her heart that no matter what price she had to pay, she would definitely make Yi Hao die a horrible death. Sensing Zixing's tears, Yi Hao also felt his heart soften. No matter what, this was Zmo's sister. Yi Hao would not go overboard. Yi Hao believed that this bit of pain was nothing to Zixing. The reason why Zixing was crying was undoubtedly because her high and mighty self-esteem had been crushed by Yi Hao. That was why she felt wronged and cried. Feeling that Yi Hao had let go of her, Zixing raised her head. Her eyes were filled with hatred as she glared at Yi Hao. Your Highness, are you all right? Cough, cough. At this moment, the old woman had been caught and looked at Zixing with a pale face. Seeing the old woman's miserable appearance, Zixing frowned, and the killing intent in her eyes grew even stronger. Speak, who are you? Yi Hao ignored the killing intent in Zixing's eyes and asked directly. Oh, didn't that girl Zmo tell you her identity? Zixing wiped her tears and sneered. Looks like the relationship between the two of you isn't that great. Cut the crap. Otherwise, I can't guarantee her reputation. Yi Hao said coldly. He's just a servant. So what if he's killed? What does it have to do with me? Zixing did not even look at the old woman as she laughed coldly. When the old woman heard Zixing's words, her expression changed drastically. She looked at Zixing in disbelief. Following which, the old woman laughed bitterly in her heart. As expected, the person whom the God Emperor has taken a fancy to is heartless. He had watched Zixing grow up from a young age. No matter what, there were feelings between the two of them. However, Zixing's words made her realize how laughable her thoughts were. Yi Hao frowned. He did not expect Zixing to be so heartless. Compared to Zmo, it was a world of difference. Yi Hao really could not understand why there was such a big difference between the two women who looked almost the same. Master, it's better to just kill a woman like her. Zhuge Liang waved his feather fan and said with a smile, That's not very good. Wouldn't it be a pity to kill such a beautiful woman? Yi Hao naturally understood what Zhuge Liang meant and said cooperatively, Then let her serve master and kill her after she's done. Zhuge Liang continued. The two of them discussed in front of Zixing. When Zixing heard their discussion, she immediately wanted to escape. However, her Her escape route had long been blocked by Zhuge Liang. She had nowhere to run. What do you want to do? Looking at Yi Hao, who was walking towards her step by step, Xing immediately panicked. She was really afraid that Yi Hao would do something to her on a whim. Kid, I'm warning you. Her identity is not someone you can afford to offend. Although she was bitterly disappointed by Xing's words, the old woman still could not bear to see Xing being bullied. No, I'll answer whatever you ask. Seeing Yi Hao approaching her, Xing finally could not resist and shouted, Who are you? Yi Hao retracted his hand and could not help but feel that it was a pity. Yi Hao could not help but feel a little evil in his heart. If only Xing could hold on a little longer. My name is Xing, the goddess of Zetian Divine Kingdom. When she mentioned her identity, Xing could not help but reveal a proud expression. Zetian Divine Kingdom. As soon as Yi Hao heard this name, he felt that this force was extraordinary. Moreover, Xing dared to call herself a goddess. Then there was only one possibility. Xing's force was a god-level force. And a god-level force was definitely a top existence in this 10,000 countries continent. However, Yi Hao did not understand why a god-level force like the Zetian Divine Kingdom would be interested in the emperor of a principality, a small figure. Furthermore, they had even arrested this person. Yi Hao finally understood why ZMO had told him not to look for him until he reached the martial god realm. This was because with his strength at that time, it would be difficult to find any clues about the Zetian Divine Kingdom, even if he searched for a lifetime. After all, a divine kingdom was definitely not something that ordinary people or ordinary forces could touch. This was because in the eyes of ordinary warriors, martial sages and saint-level forces were already unattainable existences. It seemed that Mo did not think highly of me back then. Yi Hao smiled bitterly in his heart. Back then, ZMO had asked him to break through to the martial god realm. That was not to make things difficult for him at all. Breaking through to the martial god realm was just a starting point. He only had the qualifications to know the name of the Zetian Divine Kingdom. And according to common sense, it was impossible for a small figure in a principality to have any hope of breaking through to the martial god realm. As soon as he heard that the force behind Xing was a god-level force, Yi Hao immediately felt a sense of pressure. He had thought that he had grown fast enough and should be able to rescue his father. But now it seemed that he was still far from it. After all, his enemy was not just a martial god, but an entire god-level force. Give me the location of the Zetian Divine Kingdom. Yi Hao asked Xing, you have the qualifications to know the location of the Zetian Divine Kingdom. Xing sneered disdainfully. Yi Hao rubbed his palms and stared at Xing's butt. Sensing Yi Hao's gaze, Xing subconsciously avoided Yi Hao's gaze. But then she thought that it was not a problem to give the location of the Zetian Divine Kingdom to Yi Hao. He was just a martial sage trash. Even if he had a third-order martial god by his side, compared to the Zetian Divine Kingdom, it was just an ant compared to a giant elephant. Moreover, even if Yi Hao did not find the Zetian Divine Kingdom, she would not let Yi Hao off easily. Thinking of this, Xing immediately told Yi Hao the location of the Zetian Divine Kingdom. Chapter 454. Not interested. Yi Hao shrugged. His goal was to deal with the Purple Sky Divine Kingdom. He was not interested in dealing with a little girl like Xing. Could it be that you're afraid? Xing looked at Yi Hao provocatively. If you don't want anything to happen to ZMO, come to the Purple Sky Divine Kingdom obediently in a year. What did you say? Yi Hao's face instantly darkened. He hated it when people dared to threaten him. Yi Hao wanted to grab Xing, but Xing had already taken the opportunity to grab the teleportation talisman. So you can get angry too. Ha ha ha. In a year, I will trample you under my feet like trash. Seeing Yi Hao's angry look, Xing laughed proudly. I hope you don't seek death. Yi Hao clenched his fists and said with a gloomy face. Xing had already teleported away. Your Highness, Seeing Zixing teleport away, the old woman completely panicked and shouted loudly. She did not expect Zixing to abandon her at the last moment. Do you want to live or die? Yihao looked at the old woman and asked in a deep voice. The old woman looked at Yihao with a cold expression. Moreover, the blood-stained double blades in Yihao's hands could stab her at any time. I didn't expect this. I didn't expect. Granny Zisha, who has been loyal to the Purple Sky Divine Kingdom for so many years, would be abandoned by a little girl. Granny Zisha roared at the sky and laughed miserably. Boy, give me a painful death, because betraying the Purple Sky Divine Kingdom will not end well. Granny Zisha looked at Yihao with a pleading tone. Have you really decided? Seeing Granny Zisha's decision, Yihao still found it unbelievable. Boy, the strength of the Purple Sky Divine Kingdom is definitely not something a young boy like you can fight against. You will follow me sooner or later. Granny Zisha laughed mockingly. Granny Zisha looked at Yihao as if she was looking at a dead person. Boy, cut the crap. If you have the ability, then give me a painful death. After saying that, Grandma Zisha closed her eyes. Yihao took out an elixir and handed it to Grandma Zisha. Since you have some backbone, I'll reward you with this poison. What kind of pill is this? Granny Zisha looked at the elixir pill in Yihao's hand. Even with her knowledge and experience, she couldn't recognize what kind of elixir pill it was. What's the use of knowing so much when you're about to die? That's true. Hearing Yihao's words, Grandma Zisha no longer hesitated and swallowed the pill. But after waiting for a long time, she didn't feel anything wrong with her body. Granny Zisha opened her eyes and looked at Yihao's smiling face. She didn't understand and shouted, What did you give me to eat? Kneel. Yihao looked at Granny Violet Fiend. He didn't answer her question, but rather just spat out 2 words. What? Granny Zisha was stunned. Before she could react, her legs bent and she knelt on the ground, as if they didn't listen to her command. What did you give me to eat? Granny Zisha wanted to resist desperately, but she realized that she simply couldn't resist Yihao's command. What? Do you really want to die? Yihao sneered at Granny Zisha. Granny Zisha was at a loss for words. She had used all her courage to swallow the elixir pill just now. If she were to take another poison pill, she might not be able to be as resolute as before. Didn't you say that I couldn't fight against the Violet Sky Divine Kingdom? I will overthrow the entire Violet Sky Divine Kingdom for you to see, Yihao said, holding his breath. He believed that with the help of the system, he would definitely be able to accumulate enough strength to fight his way to the Violet Sky Divine Kingdom in a year's time. Granny Zisha sighed and shook her head. She obviously didn't take Yihao's words seriously. She thought that Yihao was just young and hot-headed. She knew very well how terrifying the Violet Sky Divine Kingdom was. It was absolutely unimaginable to outsiders. Let me ask you, do you know Yibatian? Yihao looked at Granny Zisha and asked, Yibatian? Who's that? Granny Zisha had never heard of the name Yibatian before. You don't know? Yihao was a little surprised. He believed that with the mind control pill, Granny Zisha wouldn't lie to him. Granny Zisha shook her head. Although she was a third-order martial god, she was a well-known figure in the Myriad Kingdom continent. But in the Violet Sky Divine Kingdom, she was just like Zixing is said, a servant. Things like Yibatians were only known to the upper echelons. After all, who was Yibatian? He was the Imperial Ant-Man. But to put it bluntly, Yibatian was a wild man. To the Violet Sky Divine Kingdom, this was a disgrace. How could it be spread outside? Naturally, it wasn't something that a character like her could come into contact with. In a secret mansion in the Violet Sky Divine Kingdom, ZMO was surrounded by starlight at this moment, and martial power like water wrapped around ZMO-er. ZMO-er's chest was moving up and down rhythmically. Kacha! Suddenly, a sound that only ZMO-er could hear clearly rang out, following which the martial arts around her surged into her body like crazy. At this time, a middle-aged woman who looked like a noblewoman quietly appeared beside ZMO. And I've broken through. ZMO, or had consolidated her cultivation. When she saw the imperial ant, she was overjoyed. I've said it before, as long as works hard, no one can catch up. The imperial ant stroked Zmo's head lovingly. Zmo narrowed her eyes and enjoyed the imperial ant's touch very much. I'm still 3 small realms behind, sister. I will definitely surpass sister. Zmo clenched her pink fists and wrinkled her cute nose. All right, Moer, you've already reached the martial saint realm. You can't rush your cultivation. You can go out and play recently. The imperial ant looked at Zmo lovingly and said, one had to know that Zmo had cultivated for such a long time. In the past, she could not even think about it. After all, Zmo was playful by nature. To be able to persist for so long, in her opinion, it was really not easy. Really, hearing the imperial ant's words, Zmo was so happy that she instantly jumped up. However, after a while, Zmo sat back down again. The imperial ant looked at Zmo with a puzzled expression. Mo, what's wrong? Ant, I don't want to play. I want to surpass sister as soon as possible, so that you and brother Yihao can meet as soon as possible. You're really my good child. Hearing Zmo's words, the imperial ant was very touched in her heart. Ant, actually, I miss brother Yihao a little too. Zmo's voice became softer and softer, and finally, it was like a mosquito's voice. However, no matter how soft Zmo's voice was, it could not escape the imperial ant's ears. When the time comes, how about I marry you to your brother Yihao? The imperial ant's face was full of smiles. Chapter 455. Your Highness, may I know why you're looking for us? At this time, in Zixing's palace, Zixing sat on the throne with a displeased expression, staring sternly at the fat and thin martial emperors. At this time, the fat and thin martial emperors were also puzzled as they looked at Zixing carefully. Let me ask you, did Mo come into contact with anyone a year ago? Zixing asked coldly. The fat and thin martial emperors looked at each other and shook their heads. How dare you lie to me? Zmo shouted coldly as the power of a martial sage pressed down on the two of them. Thud! The two of them knelt on the ground as beads of sweat the size of beans fell from their faces and smashed onto the ground. Tell me the truth. Seeing the two of them panicking, Zixing immediately slammed the throne, her eyes filled with anger. Yes. The fat martial emperor wiped his cold sweat and asked carefully, Your Highness is playful and came into contact with many people a year ago. I wonder who your Highness is talking about. Yes, I wonder who your Highness is talking about. The thin martial emperor also quickly cooperated. One must know that what they were most worried about now was Yihao's identity being exposed. If the princess was talking about this matter, then they were finished. I'm asking about Xiahao. At the mention of Yihao, Zixing gnashed her teeth in hatred and did not notice the change in the expressions of the fat and thin martial emperors. Hearing Xiaohao's name, the fat and thin martial emperors trembled violently. They did not expect it to be Yihao. They didn't understand how the eldest princess knew about this. Your Highness, please spare our lives. The fat and thin martial emperors knew that they could not hide it anymore and knelt on the ground to beg for mercy. Speak, who is that Xiahao? How's he know Moer? Zixing ignored the fat and thin martial emperors and asked directly. The fat and thin martial emperors were stunned. Did Zixing not know Yihao's identity? Your Highness, you don't know Xiaohao's identity? The fat martial emperor asked tentatively. Nonsense, if I knew. Why would I need to ask you? Zixing said with a displeased expression. Phew, the fat and thin martial emperors secretly heaved a sigh of relief. If it was only because of this, then they didn't have much responsibility. Your Highness, that Xiahao is just a nobody. We didn't investigate him back then. The fat martial emperor still planned to continue hiding Yihao's identity. Since they had concealed it from the beginning, they had no choice but to conceal it to the end for the sake of their own safety. Impudent. Nobody? Would a nobody be a martial saint? Would a nobody have a martial god as a guard? Then who do you think you are? Zixing asked unhappily. Ah, the fat and thin martial emperors were speechless. They really wanted to ask Xing if they were talking about the same person. There were martial saints and martial gods. What the hell was going on? Seeing the fat and thin martial emperors, Xing asked with a frown, "The two of you really don't know?" The fat and thin martial emperors immediately shook their heads. The reason for that was because they were unable to associate the person Xing spoke of with the person they knew. Moreover, they couldn't reveal Yi Hao's true identity even if they were beaten to death. That Xia Hao, does he have a different relationship with Mo? Xing, or was still unwilling to give up and asked tentatively. That Xia Hao and the little princess were just sightseeing. Nothing serious happened. Really? Absolutely. The fat and thin martial emperors immediately nodded. Seeing that she couldn't get any useful information, Xing waved her hand impatiently. Forget it. You can leave. Remember, don't leak out what happened today. Otherwise, you will suffer. Yes, yes, yes. With Xing's permission, the fat and thin martial emperors finally heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly left. Xia Hao, no matter who you are, in a year's time, I will kill you like a piece of trash. Xing looked into the void, her eyes revealing a strong, murderous intent. Phew, you scared me to death. The thin martial emperor was still in shock. Do you think you're the only one who was shocked? My back is now wet, and I almost peed myself. The fat martial emperor also patted his chest. Why do you think the first princess suddenly asked about this? The thin martial emperor asked curiously. The fat martial emperor shook his head and said angrily, "You asked me, but who should I ask? But there must be something going on here. Otherwise, the first princess wouldn't ask us for no reason. I heard that the first princess has been out recently. Do you think the first princess has noticed something?" The thin martial emperor said worriedly, "I don't think so." Also, the first princess's gaze just now was clearly a murderous look. Thinking of Xing's sharp gaze, the fat martial emperor still felt a lingering fear. Then what should we do now? The thin martial emperor's face was full of worry. If the first princess notices something, then us brothers will really be finished. Don't worry, whoever started the trouble should end it. You mean the little princess and the imperial ant? Why are the two of you here? In the imperial ant's divine palace. The imperial ant was sitting on the throne while Embark stood beside her. The imperial ant asked. Although the imperial ant did not use any martial arts power, just by feeling the imperial ant's aura, the fat and thin martial emperors had no choice but to kneel down obediently. The fat and thin martial emperors looked at Zmo and hesitated. Seeing the martial emperor's expressions, the imperial ant looked at Zmo in confusion. Zmo immediately said, "If you have something to say, just say it. If you haven't done anything bad, I won't blame you." "Thank you, imperial ant. Thank you, little princess." The fat and thin martial emperors immediately thanked her. "What are you thanking me for? You haven't said anything yet." Zmo was even more puzzled. "Imperial ant, little princess, Her Highness the eldest princess called us over just now." The plump martial emperor immediately said, "Oh, that girl Xing is back." The imperial ant was also a little surprised by Xing's return. "If that girl called you over, why did you come to me instead?" "Because the first princess asked us about an important matter. This matter is of great importance, and we can't make up our minds, so we can only report it to the imperial ant and little princess." "Oh, what is it? Is it so serious?" The imperial ant was also full of curiosity about the fat martial emperor's words, and Zmo was also curious. It's about." For a moment, the fat martial emperor did not know how to address Yi Hao. After thinking for a moment, he said, "It's about Prince Yi Hao." "What?" The imperial ant's expression suddenly changed. As soon as she heard Yi Hao, she immediately took it seriously, and the power in her body raged uncontrollably in the hall. Immediately, the imperial ant's killing intent soared as she looked sharply at the fat and thin martial emperors. Chapter 456. Could it be that sister has come into contact with Brother Yi Hao? Will something happen to Brother Yi Hao? ZMO asked worriedly after hearing the fat and thin martial emperor's words. The imperial aunt was also worried, and her expression was very ugly. According to my analysis, the eldest princess should not know the identity of Prince Yi Hao. The fat martial emperor said carefully when he saw the ugly expressions on the two people's faces. The key is that sister has come into contact with Brother Yi Hao. I don't know if Brother Yi Hao is still safe and sound. Hearing that Xing had come into contact with Yi Hao, ZMO could not calm down. All right, the eldest princess said that Prince Yi Hao is a martial sage and has a martial god protecting him. I don't know if it's true or not. The fat martial emperor suddenly remembered Xing's words and immediately said, "What? You must have heard wrongly." ZMO and the imperial aunt were shocked when they heard the news. How could Brother Yi Hao reach the martial sage realm and have a martial god protecting him? This is too unbelievable. ZMO shook her head repeatedly, not believing the fat martial emperor's words. One had to know that she was able to cultivate to the martial sage realm because of a large number of heavenly treasures, the environment, and the help of the imperial aunt. Only then could she reach the martial sage realm. According to her speed, it was already incredible enough. And Yi Hao was a loner, the little emperor of a principality. What ability did he have to break through to the martial sage realm? Moreover, martial gods were rare to begin with. It was even more impossible for them to protect Yi Hao. Are you telling the truth? The imperial aunt narrowed her eyes and looked at the fat martial emperor. In her opinion, this matter was also impossible. The fat martial emperor hastily said, "What I said is all from Her Royal Highness, the First Princess. I dare not conceal anything. I also heard it with my own ears." Seeing the anxious look on the fat martial emperor's face, the thin martial emperor also quickly said, because at this moment, the two of them were already tied together. One's loss, all's glory. Mo, what do you think of this matter? The imperial aunt looked at ZMO, and asked. The worry on her face was self-evident. ZMO, he thought for a moment and shook her head. "Aunt, I don't know. Her Highness the eldest princess has arrived." Suddenly, a guard shout came from outside the door. When the fat and skinny martial emperors heard that Xing was here, they immediately began to panic and looked at their aunt anxiously. "Let's hide at the back first," Imperial Aunt said softly. The fat and thin martial emperors quickly expressed their gratitude and hurriedly ran to the back. They absolutely could not let the eldest princess know that they had come to Imperial Aunt's place. Otherwise, they would not have a good life. Aunt Xing's face was full of smiles as she threw herself into her aunt's arms. "Xing, how do you have the time to come to my place?" The imperial aunt squeezed out a smile as she stroked Xing's hair. Xing stood up from her aunt's arms. "Aunt, what are you saying? Are you only allowing my sister to be here and not allowing me to be here? How could that be?" The imperial aunt looked at Xing with a complicated expression. Sister actually broke through. Congratulations." Suddenly, Xing noticed the Mo's cultivation and was very displeased, but she still smiled and said, "Mo is still far from elder sister. Elder sister is already a 4th-level martial sage." ZMO replied with a smile. "How could that be? With your talent and aunt's guidance, you will definitely surpass elder sister very soon." After Xing finished speaking, her expression turned bitter. Not long ago, elder sister was bullied and almost couldn't come back. ZMO and the imperial aunt were both moved when they heard Xing's words. The imperial aunt immediately could not hold it in and asked tentatively, "Who is so bold to dare bully our eldest princess of the Purple Heaven Divine Kingdom?" "That's right. Elder sister is so powerful and has Grandma Zisha's protection. Who can bully you?" ZMO also chimed in. "Then I'll have to ask you, Mo." Xing smiled and held ZMO's hand. "Ask me?" Zmo did not know why, but she felt that her sister's hand was no longer as natural and relaxed as before. She clearly knew that between her and her sister, as her aunt had said, there was a gap between them. I wonder if you remember a person called Xiahao. Zixing said with a smile. At the same time, she paid close attention to the changes in Zmo's expression. Zmo had the fat and thin martial emperors to report in advance, so she was already mentally prepared. Therefore, Zmo's expression was very natural as she frowned. Xiahao? I seem to have heard of this name, but I'm not familiar with it. By the way, elder sister, who is this Xiahao? Zmo looked at Zixing and asked with a puzzled expression. Zixing could not help but feel a little disappointed when she saw the change in Zmo's expression. This was because she did not see the change in Zmo's expression that she wanted to see. Do you really not remember? Zixing asked unwillingly. Zmo immediately shook her head. Xing who is this Xiahao that you're talking about? He has confused me. The imperial aunt was afraid that Zixing would see through Mo's lie, so she asked with a gentle expression. Aunt, you don't know. That damn Xiahao bullied me and even captured Grandma Zisha. Zixing said with a worried expression. What? Who dares to be so bold? The imperial aunt was furious and could not help but shout. Do you really think that there's no one in my purple sky divine kingdom? Aunt, don't be angry. I've already made a bet with Xiahao. In a year, he will come to my purple sky divine kingdom, and I will avenge my humiliation. Zixing's face was filled with excitement at the thought of trampling Yi Hao under her feet. She could not wait to trample Yi Hao under her feet and make Yi Hao kneel at her feet and beg for mercy. Oh, Xing you've confused me. What bet? What do you mean by coming to my purple sky divine kingdom? And who exactly is this Xiahao? Hearing Zixing's words, the imperial aunt could roughly tell that Yi Hao's life was not in danger yet. She could not help but heave a sigh of relief, but she still asked worriedly. Zixing immediately told her about the bet with Yi Hao. Hearing this, Zmo and the imperial aunt finally heaved a sigh of relief. After Zixing finished speaking, she looked at Zmo with a face full of resentment. Mo, do you really not know Xiahao? But looking at Xiahao's behavior, it seems that he has a close relationship with you. She thought of Yi Hao's expression when he saw her. Zixing still did not believe that Zmo would not have any impression of Yi Hao. Zmo stuck out her tongue and said with a smile, Sister, it's not like you don't know that I'm playful by nature. A year ago, I didn't know a lot of good friends, but I really can't remember their names. Then do you recognize this portrait? Zixing had already found someone to draw a portrait of Yi Hao in advance. Chapter 457. It's him. I have some impression of him, but isn't he just a young master? He pestered me back then, but I shook him off later. Zmo carefully observed the portrait. After a long time, she spoke. He's not an ordinary young master. How could an ordinary young master have a martial god expert protecting him? Zixing shook her head and smiled bitterly. Sister, it's not like you don't know what my cultivation was a year ago. How could I detect a martial god expert? That's true. By the way, sister, how did you come into contact with him? Hearing Zmo's question, Zixing was speechless. She couldn't possibly say that she had gone to the Great Sun Dynasty to get someone to investigate Yi Hao. I didn't go out to train. Then that person might have mistaken me for you. Zixing immediately made up an excuse. All right, you sisters can go out and chat for a while. I'm a little tired. Imperial Aunt suddenly waved her hand and said, Yes, Aunt. Wait a moment, Xing. Leave the portrait behind. I'll go check who it is. How dare he insult my Xing? I'll definitely not let him off. As she spoke, Imperial Aunt's aura spread out. Thank you, Aunt. Zixing immediately handed the portrait in her hand to Imperial Aunt. Then, she walked out with Zmo. Seeing Zixing leave, the fat and thin martial emperors slowly walked out. Take a look, the two of you. This is my son. Imperial Ant looked at the young man in the portrait and asked with a complicated expression. The fat and thin martial emperors immediately took the portrait and looked at it carefully. Although this Prince Yi Hao has changed a lot in more than a year, I can definitely recognize that this is Prince Yi Hao. After looking at it for a moment, the fat martial emperor said with certainty, "The two of you must keep this matter secret. If there's a mistake, humph." Imperial Ant's cold snort was full of dignity. The fat and thin martial emperors quickly knelt on the ground. "Don't worry, Imperial Ant. We'll definitely keep this matter to ourselves. I have something for you to do." "What is it, Imperial Ant? Please instruct us." "Go and find out where Zisha is and whether she's back. If you do this well, I'll help you become a martial sage." Imperial Ant used both grace and power. "Thank you, Imperial Ant. Thank you, Imperial Ant." Hearing Imperial Ant's words, the fat and thin martial emperors were extremely excited. The martial saint realm was a realm that they could only dream of. The reason for that was because according to their cultivation and talent, they would likely be stuck at the martial emperor realm for the rest of their lives. However, with Imperial Ant's words, it was equivalent to hugging Imperial Ant's thigh, although it was unlikely that he would soar into the sky. However, as long as they managed to break through to the martial sacred realm, their status and treatment would change tremendously. "Sister, don't call me sister." Zimo looked at Zixing, wanting to ease the awkward relationship between the two of them, but he did not expect to be interrupted by Zixing. "I don't care if you know Xia Hao or not. In a year's time, I will kill him right in front of you." Zixing left without looking back. Looking at Zixing's back, a determined look appeared in Zimo's eyes. She muttered, "I will definitely not let you hurt Brother Yi Hao. Moreover, sister, your change is too much." Seeing Zixing's increasingly domineering aura, Zimo had mixed feelings. "I can't let you continue like this, or you will become like father." When Zimo thought of the Purple Heaven Divine Emperor's appearance, Zimo felt a lingering fear. When she thought of her sister becoming like the Purple Heaven Divine Emperor, Zimo could not accept it, because the Purple Heaven Divine Emperor was too unreasonable. Otherwise, he would always have a feeling of being 1,000 miles away. It was as if the Purple Heaven Divine Emperor's blood was cold from birth. Therefore, in order to prevent her sister from hurting Yi Hao, in order to prevent her sister from becoming like the Purple Heaven Divine Emperor, she had to surpass Zixing in terms of cultivation. "Ant, I want to explore the ancient demon realm." Zimo made up her mind and said to Imperial Ant. Imperial Ant's expression changed, and she frowned. "Imo, don't mess around." "Ant." Zimo looked at Imperial Ant pleadingly. Imperial Ant said earnestly, "Imo, although the ancient demon realm is full of opportunities, it is also full of threats. That is really a place of death. There are very few people who can come out alive. But I want to surpass sister, so Imo can only do this. No matter what, this matter is not allowed." Imperial Ant's attitude suddenly became firm, because for Zimo's safety, she definitely could not let Zimo take the risk. "Why can you, Ant, but I can't?" Zimo said, unconvinced, her tone full of stubbornness. "No means no," Imperial Ant said coldly. One had to know that when she entered the ancient demon realm, it was purely because she had no choice. Otherwise, she would not have the status she had today, nor would she be able to fight against the Purple Heaven Divine Emperor, much less save Yi Beishan's life. But the ancient demon realm, even to her now, was a nightmare that she would never be able to get rid of. Naturally, she could not bear to let Zimo take that risk. All right, seeing that she could not persuade Imperial Ant, Zimo could only compromise. "That a good girl." Imperial Ant patted Zimo's head lovingly. Zimo took the opportunity to throw herself into Imperial Ant's arms, a trace of determination and reluctance flashing in her eyes. "Master, you're fine? Where have you been these few days? I was so worried." Yi Hao had just stepped in a Great Sun Dynasty's palace when the Fire Emperor and the rest immediately came to greet him. How is it possible? You're not dead. Where's the goddess? Seeing Yihao's figure, Emperor Sun looked behind Yihao, but did not see Xing and could not help but be puzzled. What are you talking about? How dare you curse Master to die? Uncles, beat him up! The Fire Emperor shouted unhappily. The four imperial uncles immediately clenched their fists and greeted Emperor Sunday, looking at their proficiency. It was obvious that they had practiced a lot these few days. Emperor Sun could only hold his head in his hands. He had never thought that this group of old guys, in order to break through to the 8th Order Martial Emperor realm, would wag their tails and beg for mercy in front of him. But in the blink of an eye, all of them were peak martial saints. In the entire Great Sun dynasty, there was simply no one who could restrain the four imperial uncles. It was the same for the Fire Emperor. As long as he was not pleasing to the eye, he would ask the four imperial uncles to beat him up. These few days, he had beaten them up quite a bit, and those trusted generals and guards of his had long hidden somewhere. Therefore, he could only pray that the goddess would quickly subdue Yihao and then come to save him. But he did not expect that after waiting for so long, it was only Yihao who came and went. Sir, please don't hit me. I know my mistake. The feeling of being beaten by four peak martial saints was really unpleasant, and Emperor Sun could only loudly beg for mercy. Chapter 458. Sir, please ask. As long as I know, I will definitely tell you the truth. Emperor Sun said with a long face. Let me ask you, why did Xing come to your Great Sun dynasty? Yihao asked the question that had been in his heart. This, Emperor Sun paused and immediately stuttered. Speak. Yihao shouted angrily, and Emperor Sun immediately trembled. I guess it's because of the All-Kingdom Grand Ceremony in 20 days. Emperor Sun guessed. Yihao looked at Emperor Sun and motioned for him to continue speaking. Sir, I'm not too sure about the situation. I know that the goddess wants to rope in some big forces through my Great Sun dynasty. Emperor Sun said his guess. That's strange. Yihao frowned, and his heart was filled with confusion. According to Xing's identity, why would she rope in other forces? This could only mean that there was an inside story. The biggest possibility was that someone wanted to compete with Xing for something. Could it be Mo? Yihao guessed. However, no matter what, Xing's plan had been completely ruined by him. All-Kingdom Grand Ceremony. Reputation points. Peak Martial Sage Elixir Formula. Yihao looked at the void and muttered in his heart. He didn't have much time left. No matter what happened a year later, he had to go to the Purple Sky Empire. It was better to be safe than sorry. What if Xing did something out of line and hurt Zisha? Suddenly, Yihao shouted outside the main hall. I'm here. Granny Zisha heard Yihao's call and immediately flew into the main hall and knelt at Yihao's feet. He saw Granny Zisha kneeling at Yihao's feet. Emperor Sun felt that his heart had almost jumped out of his chest. A year ago, Granny Zisha had been by Xing's side and he had accidentally seen her. When he had found out that Granny Zisha was a martial god, he had tried to curry favor with her. However, from the beginning to the end, Granny Zisha had never looked him in the eye. But he couldn't understand why Granny Zisha would kneel before Yihao. Could it be that Yihao's background was even stronger than Xing's? At the thought of this, Emperor Sun gulped, and his gaze when looking at Yihao changed once again. Emperor Sun told himself that he must hug Yihao's thigh. Let me ask you, how's the relationship between Xing and Mo? Yihao asked worriedly. The relationship between the eldest princess and the little princess has always been good, but in the past year, it seems that a lot of changes have taken place. Zisha said honestly. Then what do you think of Xing, saying that she wants to hurt Mo? Hearing Yihao's words, Grandma Zisha immediately shook her head. That's impossible. Seeing Yihao's puzzled face, Grandma Purple Demon didn't dare to keep him in suspense. She immediately said, the little princess is protected by Imperial Aunt. She won't be hurt at all unless something happens to Imperial Aunt. Oh? Who is this Imperial Aunt? Why is she so good to Mo? Yi Hao couldn't help but be curious about this imperial ant. Grandma Zisha looked around. After all, if she continued to talk, it would be about the purple sky divine kingdom. There were too many people here, so she really didn't dare to say more. Don't worry, other than him, we're all on the same side. Hearing Yi Hao's words, Emperor Sun's heart suddenly jumped. The reason for that was because he could sense that there were several fiery gazes fixed on him. And what shocked him the most was Grandma Zisha's gaze. He secretly glanced at Grandma Zisha and found that there was a trace of murderous intent in her eyes. Emperor Sun was so scared that he almost peed his pants. He immediately knelt at Yi Hao's feet. Don't, my lord. I'm also loyal to you. Is that so? Why don't I believe it? Yi Hao glanced at Emperor Sun's loyalty and looked at him mockingly. Emperor Sun panicked and immediately lowered his head. Could it be that he can see through my thoughts? Emperor Sun thought guiltily. Aren't you loyal? Then this pill is my reward for you. Yi Hao took out a mind control pill and said, What? What pill is this? Emperor Sun looked at the pill in Yi Hao's hand and didn't dare to take it. He asked carefully, If my lord wants you to eat it, just eat it. Don't tell me that you think that my lord wants to waste a pill just to kill you. The Fire Emperor naturally recognized the mind control pill. Naturally, he knew that Yi Hao wanted to subdue Emperor Sunday. He couldn't help but envy Emperor Sun's dog shit luck. Yes, yes, yes. Emperor Sun heard the Fire Emperor's words, and his face was filled with embarrassment. Indeed, the Fire Emperor was right. Everyone present was Yi Hao's men, and any one of them could easily crush him and kill him. Emperor Sun didn't hesitate and took the pill and swallowed it. Your cultivation is too low. This pill is for you. Step aside first. Yi Hao took out a Peak Marshal Saint pill and threw it to Emperor Sun. This is... Hearing Yi Hao's words, Emperor Sun was stunned for a moment before he was overjoyed. This is a Peak Marshal Saint pill. Why aren't you thanking me? Seeing Emperor Sun's expression, the Fire Emperor was furious. He had been suppressed by Emperor Sunday. It wasn't easy for his cultivation to be higher than Emperor Sun's, and he could bully him for once. But he didn't expect Emperor Sun to be so lucky and also receive a Peak Marshal Saint pill. However, when the Fire Emperor looked at his 4 uncles, his mood became better. No matter what, he had 5 Peak Marshal Saints on his side. No matter what, they were stronger than Emperor Sun alone. Zisha continued. Yi Hao was also very interested in the power of the Purple Sky Divine Kingdom. The Purple Sky Divine Kingdom is one of the few God-ranked forces in the 10,000 Lands continent. The ruler of the Purple Sky Divine Kingdom is known as the Purple Sky Divine Emperor. Every 100,000 years, the position changes. Hearing this, Yi Hao couldn't help but secretly click his tongue. The position of a Divine Emperor needs to be changed once every 100,000 years. One must know that a Peak Marshal Saint can only live for 50,000 years. And the candidates for the position of Purple Sky Divine Emperor must be female every time. They are all personally selected by the previous Imperial Ant and the Divine Emperor. At this time, the Purple Sky Divine Emperor was different from before, because in the past, all the power of the Purple Sky Divine Kingdom was in the hands of the Purple Sky Divine Emperor. The Imperial Ant was in name, but not in power. She could only play the role of supervision. Listening to Granny Z Shah's narration, this time, the Imperial Ant was able to share the world with the Purple Sky Divine Emperor. Each of them controlled half of the Purple Sky Divine Kingdom. After hearing this, Yi Hao couldn't help but secretly admire her. What kind of woman could do this? Actually, I heard that the Imperial Ant was supposed to be the Divine Emperor this time. However, something happened and the Imperial Ant voluntarily gave up the power of the Divine Emperor. What happened to make the Imperial Ant give up the power of the Divine Emperor? Chapter 459. Granny Purple Demon smiled bitterly and shook her head. This is the secret of the higher-ups of Purple Heaven Supreme God. It's not something that I can know. However, Yi Hao heaved a sigh of relief after hearing how powerful his Imperial Ant was. At least with his Imperial Ant's protection, Mo's safety was guaranteed. There was still half a month's time before the grand ceremony. Yi Hao didn't dare to waste anything. He directly instructed Emperor Sun to find the best alchemy furnace in the Great Sun Empire. At the same time, he asked Emperor Sun and the Fire Emperor to collect herbs like crazy. This was because Yi Hao knew that he would need a high level of alchemy in order to refine the peak martial sage elixir. Instead of forcing him to do something beyond his ability, he might as well prepare it now. There were still 3 days before the grand ceremony. The Fire Emperor and Emperor Sun stood at the door of the main hall and said softly, "My lord, it's time for us to set off." One had to know that in the past few days, Yi Hao had shocked them wave after wave. They didn't expect Yi Hao to really know how to refine elixirs. At first, they thought that Yi Hao was just fooling around. After all, Yi Hao was so young and already had such a high level of cultivation. This had already overturned their worldview. However, over the past 10 days, they had people transport batch after batch of medicinal herbs into the palace. Then, batches of elixirs were sent out. From time to time, they peeked through the door and found that Yi Hao was refining elixirs all the time. And those elixirs were indeed from Yi Hao's furnace. But this was nothing. After all, Yi Hao was only refining 3rd or 4th level elixirs at the beginning. Just when they thought that Yi Hao was cultivating his sentiments, Yi Hao suddenly changed his mind. In the end, batches of 5th level elixirs were sent out. They found that the elixirs that Yi Hao refined were all high-quality elixirs. Just when they thought that it was going to end, batches of 6th level elixirs were sent out. Just a few days ago, a batch of 7th level elixirs were sent out. At this moment, their worldview. No, in front of Yi Hao, they had completely lost their worldview. One must know that the cultivation of pill forging in the Myriad Kingdom continent wasn't any weaker than the cultivation of martial arts. As for the alchemy profession, it would take at least a few years for them to break through to the next level. Most of them were stuck at the 4th or 5th level for the rest of their lives. Who could be like Yi Hao, who could make breakthroughs in martial arts cultivation as easily as drinking cold water? And his breakthrough in alchemy was actually not inferior to his breakthrough in martial arts. At this moment, other than shock, the two of them were completely in awe of Yi Hao. So fast, Yi Hao heard the commotion outside. He had also finished concocting a cauldron of pills. He didn't expect that 10 days would pass so quickly. These 10 days of alchemy day and night, the harvest was also very huge. His alchemy profession had already broken through to the 7th rank. Yi Hao glanced at his experience bar and realized that there was not much left before he could break through to become a Tier 8 alchemist. Yi Hao glanced at the spiritual herbs beside him. It should be about time. Thinking up to this point, Yi Hao skillfully threw the spiritual herbs into the cauldron. At the same time, he formed a hand seal and channeled his martial arts energy into the cauldron. Huff again. Very quickly, a cauldron of pills was completed. Yi Hao skillfully took out the pills from the cauldron and repeatedly threw the spiritual herbs into the cauldron. Cauldron after cauldron, the cycle repeated. Yi Hao had completely forgotten about the concept of time. After waiting outside the main hall for half a day, Yi Hao still hadn't come out. Emperor Sun's face was filled with anxiety as he looked at the Fire Emperor, not knowing what to do. The Fire Emperor also had a look of helplessness. Let's wait. Looks like our master has reached a critical point in his pill forging. They waited for 2 days. During this time, the two of them wanted to call Yi Hao numerous times. But when they saw how serious Yi Hao was, they didn't dare to interrupt him. Huff! All of a sudden, Yi Hao heaved a sigh of relief as his face was filled with smiles. I've finally broken through. It seems like the time taken has exceeded my expectations. Yi Hao didn't expect that the closer he was to the 8th level, the less experience he would gain. But if he didn't break through, Yi Hao's heart would itch uncontrollably. Hence, he wasn't paying attention and 2 days had passed. I'm sorry for making you wait. Seeing the anxious looks on the faces of the Fire Emperor and Emperor Sun, Yi Hao felt a little apologetic. Master, let's set off quickly. There's still a day left. I'm not sure if we can make it in time. The Fire Emperor and Emperor Sun didn't dare to complain as they spoke anxiously. Yi Hao didn't dare to delay any further as the three of them flew off at top speed. The four imperial uncles had already brought their men and left earlier. This Fire Emperor really doesn't know what's good for him. He can even be late for the grand ceremony. That's right. I think this is the Fire Emperor. He doesn't even put us in his eyes. At this moment, there were 9 people standing on top of a mountain. Every one of them was wearing a luxurious dragon robe. At this moment, many people revealed looks of dissatisfaction, and some even directly complained. One had to know that they were the leaders of the imperial dynasty. They were on the same level as the Fire Emperor. How could they accept that they had to wait for the Fire Emperor at this moment? I think the Fire Emperor has had enough of being the leader of the imperial dynasty. Emperor Song said unhappily. Emperor Song is right. He should be taught a lesson. Emperor Song's background was the most powerful among them. The moment Emperor Song finished speaking, someone immediately praised him. Everyone, don't be anxious. The Fire Emperor will be here soon. Hua Ji saw that the 9 of them were unhappy and immediately stood up to explain. After all, this was the grand ceremony. He didn't expect Yi Hao to not be here yet. It wouldn't be good if he caused a rift among the 9 of them. Who do you think you are? This isn't a place where you can set foot. Get lost. Emperor Song looked at Hua Ji unhappily. You? Hua Mia was furious when he heard Emperor Song's words. Get down. Hua Ji stopped Hua Mia. It's not good to make enemies now. Hua Mia calmed down slightly when he heard Hua Ji's words. However, he still looked at Emperor Song unhappily. One had to know that Emperor Song's cultivation was the worst among them. He was only a 3rd Order Martial Emperor. If it weren't for the fact that he had an Emperor-rank force behind him, he would be nothing. What? You seem to be unhappy with me. Emperor Song looked at Hua Mia unhappily when he saw the dissatisfaction in his eyes. If you don't want the imperial dynasty to be destroyed and demoted, kneel down before me. Otherwise what? Emperor Song's arrogant words were interrupted by Hua Mia. Otherwise, I'll make sure you die without a burial ground. With an Emperor-rank force behind him, Emperor Song didn't care about anyone present. I'll see how you'll make me die without a burial ground. Hua Mia was a person who was easily angered. If it weren't for the fact that he was afraid of causing trouble for Yi Hao, he would have slapped Hua Mia. Chapter 460 F*CK your mother. Who dares to touch me? Hua Ji stepped forward and slapped Emperor Song's face. You actually dared to hit me? Emperor Song's eyes widened as he clutched his cheek. He was completely dumbfounded. Emperor Song wasn't the only one. The other 8 emperors and the guards who had rushed forward were also stunned as they looked at Hua Ji in astonishment. You bunch of trash. What are you waiting for? Kill him. Emperor Song covered his face as he shouted in exasperation. Attack. The guards heard Emperor Song's command and raised their weapons. Xiao, xiao, xiao. Suddenly, the sound of something breaking through the air could be heard as 3 figures appeared in front of everyone. I'm sorry, everyone is here to play. Yi Hao felt apologetic for being late for so long. He cupped his fists and said, Who are you? Everyone turned to look at Yi Hao and realized that they didn't recognize this young man. This is... The Fire Emperor stepped forward and was about to introduce Yi Hao. Fire Emperor, I'll kill you. Seeing the Fire Emperor behind Yi Hao, Emperor Song was enraged. Attack! As soon as Emperor Song finished speaking, he charged towards the Fire Emperor behind Yi Hao. Seeing Emperor Song charging towards him, Yi Hao had a puzzled look on his face as he reached out and grabbed Emperor Song. Who is this person? He's so strong. He actually managed to grab Emperor Song. Everyone was shocked and looked at Yi Hao in surprise. The only one who had seen Yi Hao attack was the martial saint Emperor Zhou. At this moment, Emperor Zhou squinted his eyes and looked at Yi Hao curiously. With his cultivation level, he could naturally see that Yi Hao was a 4th Order Martial Emperor. However, the speed of Yi Hao's attack was definitely comparable to a martial saint's. Emperor Wu was the youngest emperor among them. At this moment, he was looking at Yi Hao with a face full of battle intent. This was because, with his age, he was the most eye-catching among the emperors. This greatly satisfied his self-esteem. But now that the younger Yi Hao had appeared, he had a feeling that Yi Hao was stealing his limelight. "Let go of me." Emperor Song was in Yi Hao's grasp. He immediately panicked and struggled. Where did this wild brat come from? How dare he cause trouble here? This was the time for him to show off and crush Yi Hao. How could Emperor Wu miss this opportunity? His cultivation as a first-level martial saint was undoubtedly revealed. Emperor Wu is indeed one of the best of the younger generation. He has actually broken through to the martial saint realm. The younger generation will surpass us in time. It seems that we are really old. Emperor Wu's future achievements will definitely surpass ours. Hearing the words of the martial emperors, Emperor Wu could not help but straighten his back. It was obvious that he enjoyed these words very much. Only Emperor Zhou looked at Emperor Wu, who was enjoying the attention of the crowd, and shook his head. Emperor Song was in Yi Hao's grasp. When he sensed Emperor Wu's cultivation, he immediately begged for help. "Emperor Wu, quickly save me. Brat, if you know what's good for you, quickly let go of Emperor Song. Otherwise, I will teach you a lesson." Emperor Wu pointed at Yi Hao and shouted in a self-righteous manner. This brat must be crazy. Seeing Emperor Wu's attitude, Yi Hao was simply speechless. "If you want it, I will give it to you." Yi Hao directly threw Emperor Song, who was struggling in his grasp, towards Emperor Wu. Emperor Wu, quickly catch me." Emperor Song felt that he could no longer control his body. He begged Emperor Wu for help. "Don't worry, let me bang." Before Emperor Wu could make a move, he hugged Emperor Song intimately. "Everyone, I'm sorry for being late," Yi Hao said again under the astonished gazes of the crowd. "Brat, you are courting death." Emperor Wu pushed Emperor Song away and pointed at Yi Hao as he scolded angrily. Emperor Wu pulled out his sword and rushed towards Yi Hao. Yi Hao actually made a fool of himself in front of the crowd. This was absolutely intolerable. Looking at Emperor Wu, who was looking for trouble, Yi Hao's face flashed with a trace of dissatisfaction. Martial sword technique. Emperor Wu brandished his martial sword technique and attacked Yi Hao. Instantly, the martial Dao energy in the area trembled. It's actually an earth-grade martial technique. Emperor Wu is really strong. He is definitely a genius among his peers. They looked at Emperor Wu, who was standing in the air with his platinum dragon robe fluttering in the wind. His face was cold and arrogant, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. It was breathtaking. Under Emperor Wu's attack, many emperors were shocked. They looked at Emperor Wu with eyes full of reverence. They had no choice but to defend themselves to prevent themselves from being injured, although they felt that Yi Hao was also very mysterious and powerful. However, in the face of the martial emperor's attack, it appeared to be extremely weak. This Emperor Wu is extremely talented. He actually practiced the martial sword technique to such a level. He is much stronger than his ancestors. Seeing Emperor Wu use his martial sword technique, Emperor Zhou couldn't help but take a few more glances at Emperor Wu. One had to know that the territories of the 10 emperors present were closely connected. Usually, there would be some friction between them, or there would be some interaction between them. Therefore, Emperor Zhou knew Emperor Wu very well. He knew that Emperor Wu was extremely talented, but he didn't expect Emperor Wu to grow so quickly. Not only did his cultivation advance by leaps and bounds, but he was also very proficient in his martial sword technique. However, it was this personality that he couldn't stand watching. However, Emperor Wu's opponent was Yi Hao, an unfamiliar and mysterious young man. Emperor Zhou couldn't help but be curious about who was stronger and who was weaker. "How dare you be impudent in front of my lord? You are courting death." Seeing Emperor Wu's martial sword technique, Hu Ji was instantly enraged. "Get out of my way, you old fart." As the imperial uncle of the Fire Empire, Hu Ji knew Emperor Wu's background very well. He said impatiently. Being looked down upon by Emperor Wu made Hu Ji extremely unhappy. His figure flashed like a bolt of lightning and disappeared on the spot. When Emperor Wu saw Hu Ji's figure disappear, he was shocked. He immediately gave up on attacking Yi Hao and changed the direction of his attack to attack Huiji. Who is this person? Is there something wrong with his brain? Yi Hao couldn't understand. He had no enmity with this Emperor Wu, so why did he look at him as if he was the murderer of his father? This is the emperor of Emperor Wu's dynasty, Emperor Wu. He has been extremely talented since he was young, and his name has shaken the surrounding empires. He is a genius who has a high chance of breaking through to the martial god realm. Emperor Sun narrowed his eyes and introduced Emperor Wu to him. However, he has a great hobby, which is to be in the limelight. He probably saw you, Lord, so he wanted to suppress you and show off in front of everyone. The Fire Emperor continued. If Emperor Wu relied on his cultivation and age, he would indeed have the right to be arrogant in front of the emperors. However, meeting Yi Hao meant that Emperor Wu was destined to be sad. At this moment, Emperor Wu's attack had already landed. Everyone looked over. Everyone could only vaguely see Huiji's figure rushing towards Emperor Wu's attack. Chapter 461. Martial. Move. Sword. Technique. Emperor Wu sneered when he saw Huiji charging into his sword technique. He then activated his martial technique and controlled it to attack Huiji. Suddenly, thousands of swords appeared around Huiji. Break! Huiji snorted, and the swords around him disappeared. Emperor Wu's expression changed. His attack was broken by Huiji, and the recoil caused him to spit out a mouthful of blood. That was not the end. Huiji charged in front of Emperor Wu and punched at Emperor Wu's chest. Emperor Wu's expression changed again. He turned around and tried to escape. Bang! There was the sound of an attack. Huiji's attack accurately landed on Emperor Wu's back. Emperor Wu could not help but spit out another mouthful of blood. Stop! Seeing Huiji attacking Emperor Wu again, Emperor Zhou did not have time to think and immediately stopped him. What? You want to stop me too? Huiji narrowed his eyes at Emperor Zhou and said in a displeased tone, Don't misunderstand. Emperor Zhou's eyes flashed with displeasure, but then he showed a harmonious smile. Right now, the 10 dynasties are in the same camp. If we kill each other, we will be laughed at by the other camps. Huiji, stand down, Yi Hao said, because Emperor Zhou was right. Right now, the 10 factions were tied together. If Emperor Wu died now, Emperor Wu's dynasty would be in chaos. It would affect the score. For the sake of the big picture, Yi Hao could only spare Emperor Wu's life. But he still warned, if anyone dares to do anything, I will not let them go. When the emperors heard Yi Hao's words, their expressions changed. No matter what, they were the emperors of their dynasties. Now that they were being threatened by a young man they did not know, it would be strange if they were in a good mood. But when they saw Huiji following Yi Hao's lead and Huiji's sudden increase in strength, they could only suppress their dissatisfaction. Everyone calm down. The grand competition is more important. Let go of your prejudices. Emperor Zhou acted like a good person and stood up with a smile. Emperor Zhou was the most powerful emperor. How could they not listen to Emperor Zhou's words? Zhou was giving them a way out. So how could they not follow his words? Emperor Zhou is right. The grand competition is more important. We can't let such a small matter cause a rift between us. Let's hurry up and discuss it then. It's getting late. Several emperors immediately smiled awkwardly. At the same time, they all looked at Yi Hao's side cautiously. However, even more people were nestled up to Emperor Zhou's side. In their opinion, only Emperor Zhou could give them a bit of security. We can discuss it, but only the emperor can stay. Everyone else should leave. Although Emperor Song was afraid of Yi Hao, he still stood out and said. His gaze towards Yi Hao and Huiji was filled with displeasure. Cough, cough. That's right. The Myriad Kingdom Great Ceremony is a major event. How could some random people attend? The martial monarch coughed as he coughed while being supported by the guards. At the same time, there was a faint trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. He looked at Yi Hao viciously. The emperors were in a difficult position. Logically speaking, this was the All-Kingdom Grand Ceremony. Everyone present was the ruler of a dynasty. They were going to discuss important matters and strategies against the other factions. It was indeed inappropriate for outsiders to be present. But when they thought of Huiji's strength, they didn't know whether to speak or not. "Young master, can you leave us for a while? We have something important to discuss." Emperor Zhou smiled as he looked at Yi Hao. "Emperor Zhou, let me leave." The Fire Emperor suddenly stood up and said, "Isn't that inappropriate?" Emperor Zhou said awkwardly, "There's nothing inappropriate about it. My Fire Empire has been handed over to my master. Now, my master is in charge of the Fire Empire." The Fire Emperor said with a smile. "What?" When everyone heard the Fire Emperor's words, their faces changed. "Also, my great Sun Empire has been merged into the Fire Empire. My master is in charge of it too." Emperor Sun suddenly stood up and said, "Emperor Sun?" At this moment, everyone saw that the inconspicuous person standing behind Yi Hao was Emperor Sunday. One must know that many of the people present knew Emperor Sunday. Although Emperor Sun wasn't very famous and his status wasn't very high. But in the past year, the Great Sun Empire had caused a lot of bloodshed. They expanded their power crazily and annexed countless forces around them. Recently, there was news that the Great Sun Empire had plans to attack the Fire Empire in order to advance. At this moment, Emperor Sun actually said that the Great Sun Empire would be merged into the Fire Empire. This was unacceptable. Huiji's cultivation was terrifying now. Once the Fire Empire and the Great Sun Empire merged, they would naturally become the strongest force among them. At this moment, everyone couldn't help but look at Yi Hao. They were curious as to who Yi Hao was and how could he be so capable. Then all right. Emperor Zhou smiled awkwardly. At the same time, he was already scheming in his heart. Because of Yi Hao's appearance, his status among the crowd was greatly affected. This wasn't considered a big deal. The most important thing was that after the grand ceremony ended, the Fire Empire and the Great Sun Empire would be around as Zhou Empire. At that time, if Yi Hao attacked him, the consequences would be unimaginable. Moreover, with these two empires, Yi Hao had a high chance of advancing. One must know that in the same camp, only one force could advance. The rest of the forces would become their subordinate forces. Originally, he had already made thorough preparations. During the grand ceremony, he was 100% confident that he would advance to an Emperor-class force. If he was lucky, it wasn't impossible for him to enter a Saint-class force. But now, with Yi Hao's appearance, his status would be greatly affected. No, I can't let my years of preparation go to waste. Emperor Zhou thought in his heart. However, he still wore a smile on his face and looked like a good person. Emperor Wu snorted coldly. After a while, a dragon throne appeared behind his sleeve. He had specially hired a master to forge it. It was an Emperor-class throne. Originally, forging weapons required a large amount of resources. There was no need to mention the amount of resources needed to build a huge dragon throne. It could be said that this dragon throne set off his heroic spirit. As expected, once the Emperor-class dragon throne appeared, it immediately attracted everyone's attention. Many emperors looked at the dragon throne that Emperor Wu sat on and revealed a covetous expression. However, they all summoned their own dragon thrones and sat down. Although each of the dragon thrones was very domineering, they couldn't compare to Emperor Wu's Emperor-class dragon throne. Emperor Zhou also summoned his own dragon throne. It was actually an Emperor-class dragon throne, which instantly attracted a lot of praises. However, as a peak martial sage, Emperor Zhou had an Emperor-class dragon throne, which was within the range of everyone's acceptance. They actually brought their own dragon thrones. Seeing everyone summon their own dragon thrones, Yi Hao was also slightly surprised. After hearing Yi Hao's words, Emperor Wu immediately seized the opportunity and mocked. Some people are so powerful. Why don't they sit on a Saint-class dragon throne? Chapter 462. My lord, why don't you sit on my dragon throne? Seeing that everyone wanted to see Yi Hao make a fool of himself, the Fire Emperor transmitted his voice. My lord, My dragon throne is an emperor grade. Why don't you put up with it for now? Emperor Sun transmitted his voice at the same time. Oh, is the emperor grade dragon throne very powerful? Yi Hao ignored them and looked at Emperor Wu mockingly. I don't know if it's powerful or not. I only know that some people don't have it. Emperor Wu looked at Yi Hao contemptuously and sneered. Who said I don't have it? Yi Hao looked at Emperor Wu and retorted directly. If you have it, then take it out. Seeing that Yi Hao was unwilling to take out his dragon throne, Emperor Wu thought that he would definitely crush Yi Hao and crush Yi Hao to death this time. I'm afraid that some people are too embarrassed to take out their dragon throne because its grade is too low. Emperor Song cooperated with Emperor Wu and continued to look at Yi Hao mockingly. Why don't we make a bet? Yi Hao was a little unhappy after being provoked by the two of them again and again. One must know that his heavenly dragon throne was a god-grade throne. Emperor Wu only had an emperor-grade dragon throne, and he dared to be so arrogant in front of him. He was simply courting death. Oh, what are we betting on? Hearing that Yi Hao wanted to make a bet, Emperor Wu was instantly interested. It was fine if he couldn't beat Yi Hao in a fight, but was he afraid of making a bet? Let's bet that my dragon throne is stronger than all of your dragon thrones. Yi Hao glanced at everyone and said softly, Ha ha, aren't you afraid of biting your tongue by bragging? Stronger than all of our dragon thrones? Could it be that yours is a Saint-grade dragon throne? Emperor Wu and Emperor Song immediately started to mock Yi Hao when they heard him. Emperor Zhou also showed dissatisfaction on his face. As for the others, their faces were filled with disbelief. A Saint-grade dragon throne was forged by a Saint-grade equipment forger. A Saint-grade equipment forger status was not inferior to any martial sage expert. Even in Saint-class forces, they would be treated like emperors. Even in a god-tier faction, they could still do well. For such a person to forge a Saint-level dragon throne, how great of a background would that require? Or how much resources? What if my dragon throne is stronger than all of your dragon thrones? Yi Hao asked with a chuckle. If your dragon throne is stronger than mine, I'll give you my emperor-level dragon throne. Emperor Wu said directly. Emperor Wu's words immediately attracted everyone's attention. Emperor Song couldn't help but gulp. That was an emperor-ranked dragon throne. Was there a need to make such a big gamble? Do you think he can take out the Saint-level dragon throne? Emperor Wu's voice sounded in everyone's mind. Indeed, what Emperor Wu said makes sense. Emperor Wu even dares to bet on the emperor-level dragon throne. What are we afraid of? Let's bet with him. Let's bet. What's there to be afraid of? I don't believe that he has a Saint-level dragon throne. All the emperors were transmitting their thoughts to each other at this moment. In the end, all the emperors looked at Emperor Zhou because he was the only one who hadn't said anything yet. Let's bet. Unexpectedly, Emperor Zhou also agreed. The emperors were all like old foxes. Naturally, they knew what Emperor Zhou was thinking. They knew that this was because Yi Hao had affected Emperor Zhou's interests. Emperor Zhou couldn't wait to make a move. Seeing that the emperors had agreed, Emperor Wu felt more confident in his heart. He looked at Yi Hao and said, What if you can't take it out? You can do whatever you want with me. You said it yourself? Hearing Yi Hao's words, Emperor Wu suddenly stood up and stared at Yi Hao, afraid that Yi Hao would go back on his word. Of course, they can't make a move. Hearing Yi Hao's words, Emperor Wu immediately pointed at Hu Ji and the others. My lord, you can't. Hu Ji and the others looked anxiously at Yi Hao. They weren't sure where Yi Hao's courage came from. Could it be that Yi Hao really had a Saint-level dragon throne? But even if he had a Saint-level dragon throne, who would carry around with them? Yi Hao waved his hand, indicating that Hu Ji and the others didn't need to say anything. Hu Ji and the others still wanted to persuade Yi Hao, but they could only shut their mouths at this time. Remember this. When you lose, don't forget to give a dragon throne to my lord. Seeing the emperor's expressions, Hu Ji released his aura to threaten them. This is the emperor's meeting. How dare you act so presumptuously? Suddenly, the good-natured emperor, Zhou, snorted coldly. The aura on his body directly defeated Hu Ji's aura. Do you want to fight? Hu Ji rolled up his sleeves and stared at Emperor Zhou with his eyes wide open. Young master, Please manage your subordinates well. I'm afraid having such uneducated subordinates will affect your reputation." Emperor Zhou raised his eyes and looked at Yi Hao. Emperor Zhou's words immediately ignited Huiji's anger. He pointed at Emperor Zhou angrily. "Who are you calling uneducated? Huiji, how should I teach you?" Yi Hao suddenly said coldly. Huiji's expression changed. The Fire Emperor and the others also looked anxious. They were afraid that Yi Hao would really be angry. Huiji immediately lowered his head and didn't dare to speak again. When Emperor Zhou saw Huiji's appearance, he couldn't help but sneer. "This kid is still sensible," Emperor Zhou thought with satisfaction. "Huiji, how old are you? How many times have I taught you to love the young? Don't you know that he's young? Give in to him." Yi Hao suddenly said something shocking. "Impudent, who are you calling young?" Emperor Zhou's smile suddenly stopped. Not to mention other things, just based on his qualifications and age, he was definitely the oldest out of everyone here. But now, he was being called young by an immature brat. This was clearly toying with him and looking down on him. Emperor Zhou was furious. He directly slapped the dragon throne and stood up, pointing at Yi Hao. Huiji was also stunned by Yi Hao's words. Then, a smile appeared on his face. "Master's teachings are right. I will definitely love the young and not bicker with the younger generation. Are you really looking for death?" At this moment, Emperor Zhou was so angry that he gritted his teeth and looked like he was about to go berserk. The emperors were also stunned. They didn't expect Yi Hao to be so crazy. He was even crazier than Huiji. Indeed, like master, like subordinate. This was in public, in front of so many people. Yi Hao didn't give face to Emperor Wu and Emperor Song, but he didn't even give face to Emperor Zhou. Did I say who? Yi Hao looked at Emperor Zhou's face, full of anger, but didn't care at all. "Good. Very good. Very good." Emperor Zhou's expression changed again and again. Suddenly, he was so angry that he laughed and said "good" a few times. Yi Hao shrugged, looking indifferent because he knew that Emperor Zhou wouldn't easily make a move. Sure enough, Emperor Zhou snorted and sat back on the dragon throne. However, his body was full of murderous intent, and his eyes were full of anger. Although they were all emperors, no one dared to look directly at Emperor Zhou at this moment. If they touched Emperor Zhou's eyebrows, they were afraid of inviting trouble. Emperor Zhou, Emperor Song, and Emperor Wu laughed in their hearts when they saw that Yi Hao had completely angered them. Originally, it was very difficult for the two of them to deal with Yi Hao. Chapter 463. Emperor Wu stared at Yi Hao and said greedily, "Cut the crap. If you can't take out a dragon throne of a higher grade than mine, then divide the territories of the Great Sun Empire and the Fire Empire to us. Do you dare?" The emperor's expressions changed. They didn't expect Emperor Wu to really dare to say that. However, when they thought of being able to divide the territories of the two empires without using a single soldier, the emperors became interested. "It's destined that your daydreams will never come true." Yi Hao suddenly sneered. Just as everyone wanted to refute, a dragon throne suddenly appeared in front of everyone. The dragon throne's color was dim. Although it looked majestic and domineering in everyone's eyes, it was still a dragon throne. No matter how domineering the dragon throne was, if it wasn't a Saint Grey dragon throne, it would definitely lose. The emperors looked at Yi Hao's dragon throne. It didn't have any signs of being a spiritual artifact, and they all smiled. "Ha ha, I think there's something wrong with your brain. How can this broken throne compare to my emperor-grade dragon throne?" Emperor Wu didn't care and actually laughed out loud. "Go!" Yi Hao ignored him and actually threw the dragon throne at Emperor Wu. Emperor Wu looked at the dragon throne flying towards him and immediately dodged to the side. He said in a dissatisfied tone, "What are you trying to do? Are you going back on your word after losing?" Everyone also looked at Yi Hao in confusion. Could it be that it was really like what Emperor Wu said? Yi Hao was so anxious after losing that he went all out. "What do you mean?" Emperor Wu dodged to the side and stared at Yi Hao with a face full of anger. Boom! The dragon throne violently collided with Emperor Wu's dragon throne. How could this be? Emperor Wu was also attracted by the sound of the collision, but he was completely stunned by the scene in front of him. The heavenly dragon throne stood perfectly on Shao Qin's Emperor Grade Dragon throne, and his beloved Emperor Rank Dragon throne had already turned into a pile of scrap metal. What sorcery did you use? How did my Emperor-level throne become like this? Emperor Wu's eyes were glazed at first. Then he pretended to be crazy and shouted. This was something that he had spent several years of his own blood, sweat, and tears under the pressure of the Empire. There were also countless heavenly materials and earthly treasures that were used to create the Emperor-level throne. This Emperor-level throne definitely occupied a very important position in his heart. He regarded it as his most precious treasure. He had only taken out to show off for a short while, but it had turned into scrap metal. How could he accept this? If it weren't for Huiji, he would have rushed up and fought Yi Hao to the death. When the other emperors saw this scene, their hearts were in turmoil. The two dragon chairs crashed into each other. Emperor Wu's dragon chair was turned into scrap metal, while Yi Hao's dragon chair was completely unscathed. Then, there was only one possibility. Yi Hao's dragon throne was stronger than a martial monarch's dragon throne. But was this possible? If it was stronger than Emperor Wu's Emperor-level dragon throne, then it could only be his saint-level one. However, when they looked at the Sky Dragon throne, which exuded a domineering aura and didn't have the slightest aura of a spiritual artifact, no one was willing to believe that it was a saint-level throne. However, the truth was right before their eyes, so they had no choice but to believe it. Emperor Wu, don't be anxious. Emperor Song couldn't help but say out of concern when he saw Emperor Wu's dazed look. No, I don't believe that this broken dragon throne can be stronger than my Emperor-level dragon throne. Emperor Wu said, flustered and exasperated. Clearly, he couldn't accept that the Emperor-level dragon throne had turned into scrap metal. This kid must have done something. Everyone was speechless for a moment. Please get up. Your dragon chairs belong to me now, Yi Hao said with a chuckle. Everyone's expressions changed. Clearly, they didn't want to give their dragon chairs to Yi Hao for nothing. This dragon chair represented their status. How could they give it away for nothing? Among them, Emperor Zhou was the one who was most reluctant to part with it. This was because his dragon throne was also an emperor-level dragon throne. It had been passed down for many generations in the Zhou dynasty. If he really lost to Yi Hao at this moment, he would really lose face. Sir, if you have something to say, we can still discuss it, Emperor Zhou said with an awkward smile. Could it be that the famous Emperor Zhou wants to go back on his word? Huiji said as he stood up, please hand over your dragon chairs. Yi Hao naturally couldn't let these people off so easily. They had actually dared to covet his territory. Although my dragon throne has been destroyed, who knows what kind of sorcery you used? This doesn't prove that your dragon throne is stronger than mine. Yes, Emperor Wu is right. Emperor Wu is right. Your dragon throne looks ordinary. How could it surpass an emperor-level one? Hearing Emperor Wu's words, no one wanted to lose their dragon chairs, so they all spoke out. I think we should just forget about this. Emperor Zhou, who was a nice guy, said with a smile, because he didn't know what else would happen if this continued. Because he couldn't afford to gamble. He couldn't afford to lose his dragon throne. What was the point of talking about it now? At least he could keep his dragon throne. No, I can't let my dragon throne be destroyed for no reason. Emperor Wu roared out. Emperor Zhou frowned as he looked at Emperor Wu with dissatisfaction in his eyes. All right, I will make you lose wholeheartedly. Ding dong. Would you like to unlock the seal of the Tianlong throne? Yes. Boom. Suddenly, the ordinary Tianlong throne suddenly burst out with a dazzling rainbow-colored light. Roar! On top of the Tianlong throne, the shadow of a rainbow-colored dragon appeared, looking down at everyone. The heavenly dragon throne that was still ordinary and mediocre just now, and the incomparably dazzling heavenly dragon throne now, was simply a world of difference. At this moment, the emperors felt as if they could barely open their eyes. Yi Hao had already sat on the Tianlong throne and said with a majestic voice, "Kneel before me." Plop, plop, plop. All the emperors were in a daze, as if they couldn't control their bodies, and all of them knelt before Yi Hao. At this time, Emperor Zhou was sweating profusely. If one looked closely, they would see that Emperor Zhou's legs had already begun to bend. Looking at Yi Hao on the Tianlong throne, Emperor Zhou had the thought of surrendering to him. How is this possible? But he still relied on his willpower to resist this feeling. No, I can't kneel before him. Emperor Zhou gritted his teeth and used all the strength in his body to stand up straight on his knees. Looks like my realm is still a bit low. Yi Hao thought to himself as he looked at Emperor Zhou, but could still hold on. But he would never give up so easily. He couldn't help but roar out again, "Kneel!" Roar! The rainbow-colored dragon on the Tianlong throne suddenly roared and rushed toward Emperor Zhou. Chapter 464. No matter how much Emperor Zhou persisted, he felt a strong sense of powerlessness in front of the rainbow-colored dragon. Emperor Zhou's hair was scattered and his face was ferocious. His flushed face was covered with peanut-sized beads of sweat. Crack! The rainbow-colored dragon's shadow was entrenched on Emperor Zhou's body, emitting endless dragon's might. "Go for me!" Emperor Zhou threw out a square-shaped object. Imperial Jade Seal? Seeing Emperor Zhou throw out the Imperial Jade Seal that emitted a dazzling golden light in the air, Yi Hao didn't understand what Emperor Zhou was doing. Roar! Suddenly, just as Yi Hao was puzzled, Emperor Zhou's Imperial Jade Seal suddenly shot out a golden dragon. The golden dragon immediately condensed on Emperor Zhou's body, protecting him. This golden dragon seems a bit familiar. Looking at the golden dragon protecting Emperor Zhou, Yi Hao felt a sense of déjà vu roar. The rainbow-colored dragon felt that it was being provoked and suddenly opened its mouth, sucking toward the golden dragon. The rainbow-colored dragon's mouth seemed to have an endless suction force. In front of this suction force, the golden dragon's shadow began to struggle in panic. Roar! The rainbow-colored dragon roared again, and the golden dragon's eyes became dull. At this moment, the golden dragon was swallowed into the rainbow-colored dragon's mouth. Ding dong! Congratulations to the host for increasing the fate of the nation by one dragon. What does that mean? Seeing the rainbow-colored dragon swallowing the golden dragon's shadow, a prompt sounded in his mind. As for the increase of the fate of the nation by one dragon, he did not quite understand. Yi Hao checked the system's information and understood. Then he was ecstatic. The foundation of the nation, whether it could have good weather or not, depends on the amount of fate of the nation. And the fate of the nation in the world of 10,000 kingdoms was calculated in dragon. As long as the nation had the Imperial Jade Seal, it basically had the power of one dragon. With the power of one dragon, one could manage a force of 100,000 cities, making it have good weather and develop well. And the dragon power corresponded to the power. The greater the power, the more dragon power. If a nation's power decreased, the corresponding dragon power would also decrease. Therefore, the dragon power was also the basis of evaluating a nation's level. Of course, there were also countries that were very powerful, but their internal affairs were in turmoil. That was because there was a problem with the country's fate, which was a problem with the dragon's power. The reason why Yi Hao found the golden dragon familiar was because he had seen it before. He had seen the golden dragon on the dukedom rankings. As for the 10 golden dragons behind the Fire Dragon Empire, another golden dragon appeared behind them. It was the one that the rainbow dragon had devoured. Yi Hao had not expected the rainbow dragon to have such an ability. It was actually able to steal the fate of other countries. How could this be? No. Zhou Huang's expression changed drastically when he saw that a dragon had been snatched away, because that was the fate of the country. Losing a dragon now would definitely affect the Zhou Empire. For example, with the power of one dragon managing a city, the country would be safe and prosperous. However, if he were to use the power of one dragon to manage an entire city, the citizens of the country would definitely complain and danger would be everywhere. Furthermore, it was extremely difficult to increase the fate of a nation. A nation's fate was a nation's power, resources, military strength, and people's will. Only by increasing it could it increase. Moreover, the dragon's power represented the status of a country. Now that a dragon's power had been devoured, Zhou Huang immediately became anxious. Above the imperial jade seal, more than 10 golden dragons appeared. This was the Zhou Empire's fate. Yi Hao looked greedily at the golden dragons. Similarly, the rainbow dragon did not need to be ordered and rushed towards the golden dragons. Zhou Huang's expression changed. If the fate of the country was devoured, the Zhou Empire would be finished. Zhou Huang immediately controlled the imperial jade seal and hurriedly recalled the golden dragons. Roar! However, it was clear that Zhou Huang was too late. The rainbow dragon had already devoured 2 of the golden dragons. Sensing that the fate of the country had been reduced by 2 more dragons, Zhou Huang's face became pale. This 3 dragons' power, how many years of hard work had he spent on it? Now was gone just like that. What a pity. Seeing that the rainbow dragon had only devoured 2 dragons' power, Zhou Huang could not help but feel a little regretful. If others knew that Yi Hao had obtained 2 dragons' power for no reason and was still not satisfied, they would probably want to kill Yi Hao. At this moment, in the Zhou Empire, a group of princes, ministers, and patriarchs gathered together. Strange, why do I feel that the martial Tao of the country has become weaker? A general frowned and asked in confusion. I feel it too. Could it be that something happened to His Majesty? Everyone understood that the martial Tao of the country would definitely not decrease for no reason. Moreover, in their opinion, the decrease of the martial Tao of the country was mostly related to the fate of the country. However, no one dared to say it out loud. There's no need to make blind guesses. We will know when His Majesty returns. Suddenly, an old man said in an incomparably dignified voice. No one dared to make any more comments and obediently shut their mouths. However, the loss of the fate of the country made them restless. If they looked at the old man carefully, they could see the worry and doubt in his eyes. Do you feel that the martial Tao of the air seems to be stronger than before? In a military camp in the Fire Dragon Empire, a soldier who was cultivating suddenly opened his eyes and asked his classmate happily. I thought it was just my imagination. So you felt it too? The soldier immediately opened his eyes and replied happily. Hurry up and cultivate. I feel that the time needed to break through has shortened by a lot. Me too, kneel before me. Seeing Emperor Zhou withdraw his golden dragon, Yi Hao shouted unhappily. Since you have already released your golden dragon, don't take it back. Emperor Zhou was stunned. At this moment, his mind was in a mess. He could no longer resist the might of the rainbow dragon and directly knelt in front of Yi Hao. Seeing Emperor Zhou kneel, Yi Hao finally revealed a satisfied smile on his face. Little bastard, I will not live under the same sky as you. Emperor Zhou felt extremely humiliated that he had knelt on the ground. At this moment, Emperor Zhou looked at the ground and swore with bloodshot eyes. Yi Hao had snatched away his fate of the 3 dragons, and now he was actually asking him to kneel. He was the ruler of the Emperor Wu Empire and a peak martial sage expert. To him, kneeling before a young brat was simply a great humiliation to him. However, the rainbow dragon above his head was still suppressing him, making it impossible for him to get up. Tell me, who won and who lost? Yi Hao asked the emperors. You won. One of the emperors said with difficulty as he was suppressed by the heavenly dragon throne and couldn't breathe. Who else has any objections? Damn it, we were suppressed by your dragon throne to this extent. We can't even speak, let alone have any suggestions. At this moment, the emperors even felt like crying. Chapter 465. Broken chair? That's the dragon throne. That's the symbol of their status. At this moment, in Yi Hao's mouth, it actually became a broken chair. How could they feel good about it? At this moment, they felt as if they had eaten 10,000 dead flies, but they couldn't refute. Everyone felt the pressure from the heavenly dragon throne. They didn't expect that Yi Hao actually had such a throne. Fire Emperor, Emperor's son, Yi Hao suddenly shouted to the two emperors, "Your subordinates are here." The two emperors immediately replied, "Go and smash these broken chairs. I feel uncomfortable looking at them." Yi Hao pointed at the 9 dragon thrones and said impatiently, "What? Prodigal?" When everyone heard Yi Hao's words, they were first stunned and then thought of this with grief and indignation. These dragon thrones, the lowest grade was at least revered grade, and the best one was Emperor Zhou's. That was an emperor grade dragon throne. He smashed it just like that. Not to mention the value of the dragon throne. Just smashing it was enough to make them lose face. Why would they sit when they returned to their country? This isn't appropriate. Suddenly, one of the emperors said, "Why? Are you going back on your words?" Yi Hao sat on the heavenly dragon throne and stared at the emperor who spoke. With the support of the heavenly dragon throne, Yi Hao's words carried an unparalleled power and pressured the emperor who spoke. The emperor looked at Yi Hao's gaze and felt panic in his heart. He avoided Yi Hao's gaze and said, "No, I don't dare. My lord, isn't it a bit too wasteful to smash it?" Emperor Sun looked at Emperor Zhou's dragon throne enviously. That was an emperor-grade dragon throne. You dare to covet my emperor-grade dragon throne." Emperor Zhou looked at Emperor Sun with disdain. "As this emperor's subordinates, how can you still sit on the dragon throne in the future? My lord is right." Hearing Yi Hao's words, the two emperors immediately bowed. From Yi Hao's point of view, Emperor Sun and Emperor Fire were already his subordinates. In the future, they would also be conferred titles, but definitely not emperor or king, because that was purely looking for trouble for himself. What he wanted was to unify the world, and there would only be Yin Long. As for Emperor Sun and the Fire Emperor, it wasn't that they couldn't have a seat, but they had to follow his instructions. He absolutely could not give them the 9 dragon throne. Ha ha! This young noble is truly overbearing. Could it be that you're the only one in this world who can sit on the dragon throne? The Zhou Emperor couldn't help but loudly laugh after hearing Yi Hao. The other emperors also smiled disdainfully. It was almost as if they could feel the pain in the hearts of the Fire Emperor and Emperor Sunday. However, the next scene stunned them. Emperor Sun and the Fire Emperor took out their own dragon thrones and destroyed them with a single palm strike. No one understood why Emperor Sun and the Fire Emperor were so loyal to Yi Hao. Could it be that the two of them really didn't care about the throne and the supreme power? After Emperor Sun and the Fire Emperor finished smashing their own dragon thrones, they immediately turned their attention to the dragon thrones of the emperors. The emperors panicked. Could it be that these two people were really planning to destroy their dragon thrones? Boom, boom, boom. The two of them struck out with their palms and destroyed 8 dragon thrones. The emperors had ugly looks on their faces. They didn't expect their dragon thrones to be destroyed. How are they going to face the other officials when they returned? "Fire Emperor, let me do it." Emperor Sun looked at the Zhou Emperor's dragon throne and thought of what the Zhou Emperor had said. "Don't. This is an emperor-ranked dragon throne. To be able to destroy it with my own hands makes me excited." The Fire Emperor rubbed his hands as well. "Let's do it together then." Emperor Sun was similarly excited and couldn't hide his excitement. After all, this was an emperor-ranked dragon throne. It was placed right in front of their eyes. This was something that they could only dream of obtaining. Although they couldn't obtain it now, to be able to destroy it with their own hands was a different kind of excitement. Look, when the Zhou Emperor heard the words of the two emperors, he felt as if his heart had been cheated. He opened his eyes wide and looked at the two emperors. If it wasn't for the fact that the rainbow dragon was suppressing him, he would have definitely taught these two emperors a lesson. However, it was better if they weren't threatening him. Emperor Zhou's attitude had completely angered Emperor Sun and the Fire Emperor. "Pooey, what far chairs are these?" Emperor Sun suddenly spat at the Zhou Emperor's dragon throne. "You're courting death." Emperor Zhou shouted angrily. The anger in his eyes seemed as if he wanted to tear Emperor Sun into pieces. This was his dragon throne, and Emperor Sun actually dared to call a broken throne in front of everyone. Emperor Sun actually dared to spit at the dragon throne. He didn't even place him in his eyes. This was a complete provocation to him, and a slap to his face in front of the emperors. Indeed, the emperors were all staring at him in a daze. Seeing Emperor Zhou's angry look, the Fire Emperor couldn't help but give Emperor Sun a thumbs up. Emperor Sun's spit was really too vicious. Oomph, let's see who's courting death. Emperor Sun ignored Emperor Zhou's anger and immediately attacked the dragon throne. AI, wait for me. Seeing Emperor Sun suddenly attack, the Fire Emperor couldn't help but cry out anxiously. No. Seeing Emperor Sun attack, Emperor Zhou became anxious. Boom! Suddenly, there was an explosion and dust flew everywhere. There was no need for the dust to disperse. The Zhou Emperor already knew that his dragon throne was most likely doomed. At this moment, Emperor Zhou was kneeling on the ground and his face was ashen. He didn't even bother to hide his killing intent. I'm sorry, I couldn't control myself. Emperor Sun shrugged his shoulders and didn't seem to care about Emperor Zhou's expression. All right, everyone, don't be so courteous. Quickly get up and discuss. Seeing the 10 dragon thrones being destroyed, Yi Hao suddenly spoke with a smile on his face. Everyone's faces turned ashen. What do you mean by being courteous? If it wasn't for your dragon throne, would we have to kneel on the ground? However, just as they were about to get up, they realized that the suppression on their bodies was still there. When they looked at Yi Hao, they realized that Yi Hao didn't seem to have any intention of keeping the dragon throne. Damn it, you want us to discuss? How are we supposed to discuss? Are we supposed to kneel in front of you and discuss? Young master, since you want to discuss, can you let me get up first? One of the emperors laughed awkwardly. Oh, Yi Hao replied casually, but he didn't put away the rainbow dragon's shadow. What a joke. You forced me to unseal the dragon throne. Now you want me to take it back? How can it be so easy? Looking at the awkward faces of the emperors, Yi Hao sneered in his heart. Looking at Yi Hao's appearance, the emperors had unspeakable bitterness in their hearts, but there was nothing they could do. However, without exception, in their hearts, they hated and feared Yi Hao, this arrogant kid. However, everyone wished that they could cut Yi Hao into 1,000 pieces. At this moment, the hatred in the eyes of Emperor Zhou and Emperor Wu was self-evident, and they didn't even bother to hide it. Chapter 466. No one had expected Emperor Zhou to make such a decision. Giving up on the grand competition meant giving up on the chance to advance to the next level. Moreover, there was a higher chance that their country would be downgraded. However, given the Zhou dynasty's foundation, it was unlikely that they would be downgraded. However, it also meant that the Zhou dynasty's many years of preparation would go down the drain. My Zhou dynasty forfeits. As for you, it's up to you, Emperor Zhou said to the other emperors. Haha, my Emperor Wu forfeits as well. My Song dynasty forfeits as well. Emperor Wu and Emperor Song were the first to agree with Emperor Zhou. At this moment, Emperor Zhou couldn't help but feel smug. He wanted to see Yi Hao anxious, he wanted Yi Hao to panic, and he wanted Yi Hao to beg for mercy from him, because there were 10 countries in each camp for the competition. He didn't want Yi Hao to be the only one left in his camp. Although he had 2 empires under him, how could he defeat 10 empires? Therefore, he thought that Yi Hao would panic and beg him not to forfeit. However, to his disappointment, Yi Hao still had a smile on his face. He didn't panic at all. Keep pretending. Let's see how long you can keep pretending. At this moment, Emperor Zhou thought that Yi Hao was just pretending to be calm. Seeing that the other emperors didn't say anything, Emperor Zhou wanted to continue pressuring Yi Hao and asked in dissatisfaction, "What about you? My Wu dynasty forfeits as well. My Chun dynasty forfeits." The other emperors were afraid of Emperor Zhou and were dissatisfied with Yi Hao. Therefore, they all chose to forfeit. Seeing that the other emperors had forfeited, Emperor Zhou was in a good mood. He looked at Yi Hao with a smug expression. Of course, they were standing up instead of kneeling, which made them look even more imposing. Emperor Sun and Fire Emperor frowned. They didn't expect Emperor Zhou to use such a despicable method. If they did that, they would have to forfeit the grand ceremony, because even if they were to compete, they would lose. using his Fire Empire and Great Sun Empire to fight against 10 other empires. Even if there was a miracle, they wouldn't be able to win. Emperor Sun and the Fire Emperor watched on anxiously. They want to know how Yi Hao was going to handle this matter. Everyone, please wait for a moment, Yi Hao said to the crowd with a smile. Then he turned around and left. The emperors frowned, not understanding what Yi Hao was trying to do. Fortunately, after Yi Hao left the heavenly dragon throne, they felt the pressure on them lessen significantly. Only then were they able to get up, all of them gasping for breath. Let's go. Emperor Zhou flicked his sleeve and coldly snorted. After saying that, the emperors prepared to leave together. Everyone, please wait for a moment. The Fire Emperor opened his mouth to stop them. What? Are you trying to force us to stay? Emperor Zhou furrowed his brows and looked at the Fire Emperor unhappily. That seems to be the case. The Fire Emperor shrugged his shoulders. You think you can stop me? Everyone, let me hold these people back. You can leave first, Emperor Zhou said. The emperors cupped their fists towards Emperor Zhou and stood up to leave. Let's see who dares to move. Suddenly, the Fire Emperor shouted and revealed his peak martial saint cultivation. When he felt the Fire Emperor's peak martial saint cultivation, Emperor Zhou's face fell. If it was only Huiji who was a peak martial saint, he could still hold him back. However, with the addition of the Fire Emperor who was a peak martial saint, things became more difficult. However, this didn't mean that he would admit defeat. He hurriedly said, "Run in all directions." Emperor Zhou was trying to use the emperors to attract the attention of the Fire Emperor and the others so that he could take the opportunity to escape. Whoever runs, don't blame me for not showing mercy. Suddenly, Emperor Sun revealed his peak martial saint cultivation as well. The emperor's faces turned even uglier. Even Emperor Zhou's heart was beating like a drum. Although he was also a peak martial saint, if he wanted to escape from 3 peak martial saints, he didn't have the confidence to do so. However, what happened next made him completely dispel any thoughts of escape. The 4 emperors, including Huiji, revealed their cultivation levels as well. Their auras locked down the entire area. This wasn't a joke. The young man who had been following behind Yi Hao also revealed his peak martial saint cultivation level. 7 experts at the peak of the martial saint realm. A total of 7 peak martial saints. Under the gaze of these strong cultivators, the emperors felt their calves trembling uncontrollably. The emperors looked at Emperor Zhou with an ugly expression, waiting for Emperor Zhou to make a decision. However, at this moment, Emperor Zhou swallowed his saliva because he felt that he couldn't even protect himself. How could this be? How could there be 7 peak martial saints? This was what the emperors were thinking. Why aren't you leaving? The Fire Emperor laughed as he looked at these emperors who used to be on equal footing with him. He never thought that there would be a day when he would be able to look down on these people. Unsurprisingly, the fate of the emperors was in his hands. If he wanted the emperors to die, the emperors would definitely die. At this moment, the emperors were crying in their hearts. Under the oppression of the auras of these 7 peak martial saints, they did not even dare to move a muscle, let alone leave. They were afraid that the Fire Emperor and the others would suddenly attack. If that happened, they wouldn't even have the ability to resist. At this moment, everyone was regretting their decision. They didn't know if it was right or wrong to give up on the grand ceremony. At this moment, everyone could only pray for Yi Hao to return quickly. This made them feel a little depressed. At most, they wouldn't give up. After all, under the pressure of the 7 peak martial saints, it was too torturous. However, the emperors were curious. Logically speaking, it was still possible for Emperor Sun to break through to the peak martial saint level. After all, Emperor Sun had encountered a fortuitous encounter and they had heard of it. However, it was different for the Fire Emperor. One must know that previously, when the Sun Dynasty wanted to attack the Fire Dynasty, the Fire Emperor had requested for their help. However, among the 7 peak martial saints present, including the Fire Emperor, there were a total of 5 people from the Hua clan. If the Hua clan really had so many peak martial saints, Why would they be afraid of the Sun Dynasty? Why would they request for their help? Could it be because of him? At the same time, everyone thought of Yi Hao. Looking at the seven-colored heavenly dragon throne, the emperors were even more curious. Who exactly was Yi Hao? Could it be that he was a disciple of a powerful faction and was here to train? At this point, the emperors were filled with regret, because the more they thought about it, the more they felt that Yi Hao was a disciple of a powerful faction. And a disciple of a powerful faction was definitely not someone they could afford to offend. Moreover, these people had weird personalities. If the faction behind Yi Hao came to find trouble with them, they would be in trouble. The emperors didn't look good as they thought of a solution. They were anxious and uneasy. Chapter 467. Leave? With your subordinates here, we want to leave, but can we leave? When the emperors heard Yi Hao's words, they felt like crying. The emperors felt very complicated because they didn't know what Yi Hao wanted to do and what he was doing just now. Yi Hao smiled and sat down on the heavenly dragon throne. Plop! Suddenly, the sound of someone kneeling down could be heard. Everyone was stunned as they looked at the emperor who was kneeling on the ground. Yi Hao was also stunned when he saw this scene. Am I so dignified? One must know that I didn't activate the heavenly dragon throne to summon the rainbow dragon. The emperor who was kneeling on the ground was also stunned, because he didn't want to kneel down himself. He didn't know why, but when he saw Yi Hao sitting on the heavenly dragon throne, his legs didn't listen to him. Now that he was kneeling on the ground and felt everyone's gaze on him, he couldn't stand up or continue kneeling. All of you, please leave. Yi Hao waved his hand at the emperors. What? The emperors thought that they had heard wrongly. Logically speaking, shouldn't Yi Hao threaten them and ask them not to give up on the grand ceremony? Could it be that Yi Hao was so easy to talk to? Or was he full of confidence in the grand ceremony? Or did he not care about the grand ceremony at all? However, it was fine for Yi Hao to ignore the Myriad Kingdom ceremony. But they couldn't. They were only threatening Yi Hao. If they really gave up, Emperor Zhou dynasty would still be fine. But their country wouldn't be able to maintain its current status. And when they thought that Yi Hao might be a disciple of a powerful sect, they started to want to curry favor with him. After all, they were very envious of the strength of the Fire Emperor and the rest. Do you still need me to ask you to leave? Suddenly, Yi Hao's face turned serious as he asked in a low voice. When they heard Yi Hao's words, their hearts couldn't help but tremble. However, they didn't dare to look into Yi Hao's eyes. The emperors wanted to say something, but they had no choice but to swallow their words. Humph, let's go. The Zhou emperor coldly snorted and said to the emperors. But after waiting for a long time, he found that the emperors ignored him. At this moment, the emperors were looking at the ground or the sky as if something was attracting them. Seeing that he was ignored by the emperors, Emperor Zhou felt ashamed and angry, but he was helpless. The Zhou emperor clenched his fists, making cracking sounds. It was obvious that he was furious. Emperor Zhou angrily swept his gaze over the emperors. Then he waved his sleeves and left with his bodyguards. This young master, seeing Emperor Zhou leave, the other emperors still wanted to ease their relationship with Yi Hao. However, they realized that Yi Hao was ignoring them. The emperors were embarrassed and could only fly away. My lord, this. Seeing that the 9 powers had left, the Fire Emperor looked at Yi Hao in confusion. He didn't understand what Yi Hao was trying to do. Since you dare to threaten me, you better think of the consequences. Seeing the emperors leaving, Yi Hao stood up and spoke. My lord, what should we do now? Wait. Hearing Yi Hao's words, the others didn't understand. They wanted to ask more questions, but realized that Yi Hao had already taken out his pill furnace and was starting to concoct pills. Set up a barrier. Don't let anyone disturb my lord. Seeing that Yi Hao was starting to concoct pills, the Fire Emperor and the others retreated and instructed their subordinates. Nephew, what do you think our lord is trying to do? What are we waiting for? Huiji didn't understand and asked the Fire Emperor. How would I be able to guess what our lord is thinking? Huiji laughed bitterly and shook his head. Oh yes, do you know what our lord was doing just now? Emperor Sun asked the question that everyone was curious about. However, Everyone laughed bitterly and shook their heads. Zhou Emperor, wait for us. Zhou Emperor, why are you chasing me? Looking at the group of emperors who were chasing him until they were out of breath, Zhou Emperor said unhappily, Zhou Emperor, you are a magnanimous man. It's just that with that little bastard around, we couldn't do anything. Emperor Wu said bitterly, Zhou Emperor, you are a magnanimous man. Don't be so calculative with us. Emperor Song also said, it's him who doesn't care about you. Zhou Emperor's words instantly made the emperors feel extremely awkward. Why are you chasing me? Looking at the awkward crowd, Zhou Emperor asked with his hands behind his back. Zhou Emperor, that kid is too arrogant. He doesn't know what's good for him. That kid actually dared to humiliate us and even asked us to kneel down before him. We would rather die than be humiliated. We can't just let this go. He even dared to destroy our dragon throne. If we don't take revenge, we won't be able to live under the same sky. The emperors seemed to want to vent the anger in their hearts. One by one, they scrambled to speak. Seeing the emperor's impassioned speech and their various dissatisfaction with Yi Hao, Zhou Emperor felt slightly better. Then what do you want to do? Everyone looked at each other. Emperor Wu immediately said, if we want to deal with that arrogant kid, we naturally have to choose a person to lead us. Oh, who is this person? Zhou Emperor asked despite knowing the answer. That person is naturally the virtuous and prestigious Emperor Zhou. That's right. Only you can lead us. No one else can. Zhou Emperor, just give us your orders. We will listen to you. The emperors immediately scrambled to speak. Hearing the emperor's words, Zhou Emperor's face finally revealed a smile. But he still waved his hand. Everyone is on the same side. There's no need to be so polite. But in order to deal with that ignorant kid, I won't refuse. Everyone saw Zhou Emperor's fake expression and blushed with shame. But who asked Zhou Emperor to be the strongest among them? Everyone could only continue to flatter him. Moreover, Yi Hao had humiliated them. He actually dared to ask them to kneel. Who were they? They were the dignified emperors of a dynasty. If this matter were to spread out, it would be a great humiliation. But if the people present weren't brainless, they would definitely not mention this matter. Because if their people knew about this, they wouldn't have the face to continue being emperors. This matter could be ignored. Yi Hao had even smashed their dragon throne. This matter could also be ignored. Yi Hao had actually forced them to forfeit the Myriad Kingdom ceremony. How were they going to explain this when they returned? They originally wanted to curry favor with Yi Hao, but Yi Hao didn't know what was good for him. So, he couldn't blame them for being impolite. Therefore, they had to join forces to deal with Yi Hao. Zhou Emperor, what should we do next? Emperor Song looked at Zhou Emperor and asked, with our strength, we naturally can't deal with him. We have to think of something. Zhou Emperor pondered. I think that kid's dragon throne is a treasure. Why don't we publicize it a little and let people snatch it? An emperor said sinisterly. Chapter 468. No. Hearing the emperor's discussion, Emperor Zhou immediately cut them off. Looking at the emperor's puzzled expression, Emperor Zhou immediately said, don't forget, that kid might have a powerful force behind him. Hearing that Yi Hao had a powerful force behind him, everyone's expression changed. Looking at everyone's worried expression, Emperor Zhou immediately comforted them with a smile. Of course, that's just a possibility. Maybe that kid doesn't have a powerful force behind him. Only then did everyone heave a sigh of relief. But when they thought of Yi Hao's heavenly dragon throne, they guessed that Yi Hao didn't have a powerful force behind him. The chances were very slim, so we have to be careful. Before we investigate the heavenly dragon throne thoroughly, we can't leak it unless we have no other choice. Emperor Zhou is right. Emperors quickly agreed with Emperor Zhou's words. Emperor Zhou immediately pulled Emperor Wu to the side and whispered in his ear, Emperor Wu, I don't feel at ease sending someone else to do this. I'll send you to do it. Emperor Zhou immediately pulled Emperor Wu to the side and whispered in his ear. Emperor Wu immediately flew away. Emperors looked at Emperor Zhou in confusion. They didn't understand what Emperor Zhou was up to. Everyone, It would be a great humiliation for me to return to my country like this. Emperor Zhou, what do you think we should do now? We'll listen to you. Everyone immediately looked at Emperor Zhou, because even if Emperor Zhou didn't say it, they wouldn't have the face to return to their country. Otherwise, they wouldn't be standing here. Emperor Zhou thought for a moment and said, "Let's go to Little Heaven Alliance." What? Hearing Emperor Zhou's words, everyone's expression changed again. Because Little Heaven Alliance wasn't just another faction, it was their enemy. Now that they were going to the enemy's faction alone, wasn't that asking for trouble and walking right into a trap? Isn't that ignorant kid very arrogant? Emperor Wu snorted coldly. Since he doesn't need us, I believe Little Heaven Alliance definitely needs us. When the time comes, we'll join forces with Little Heaven Alliance and see how long he can last. Hearing Emperor Zhou's words, everyone nodded. The Zhou Emperor is right. I don't believe that his great Sun Empire and the Fire Empire can defeat our 19 empires. The Song Emperor's eyes lit up as he spoke. When she thought of Yi Hao, she recalled the scene of her being thrown out by Yi Hao in front of everyone. To her, that was a great humiliation. At this moment, he wished he could throw Yi Hao out as well. Will the Little Heaven Alliance want us? An emperor asked uncertainly. Emperor Zhou sneered. As long as the Little Heaven Alliance is not stupid, they will definitely agree. Let's go. Emperor Zhou is in a very good mood. He immediately led the emperors towards Small Heaven Alliance's camp. How is it? The Fire Emperor looked towards Emperor Sun anxiously. Emperor Sun's expression was somewhat ugly. I think they're heading towards the direction of the Little Heaven Alliance. What? The Fire Emperor's face fell. They were not stupid. Naturally, they knew what the emperors and the others wanted to do in the Little Heaven Alliance. Should we report this to our master? Emperor Sun looked at the peak of the mountain where Yi Hao was still concocting pills and asked, "Let's go. This is an important matter." The Fire Emperor threw caution to the wind. This was because if the emperors were to side with the Little Heaven Alliance, they would really be finished. Originally, using 2 empires to fight against 10 empires was already enough to make them feel helpless. If they were to fight against 19 empires, they wouldn't be able to survive. Master, the Fire Emperor and Emperor Sun's hearts jumped as they interrupted Yi Hao's pill concoction. Are you trying to say that those trashes have gone to the Little Heaven Alliance? Yi Hao raised his head and laughed as he spoke. The Fire Emperor and Emperor Sun paused as they asked in unison, "Master, how did you know?" One had to know that they had been guarding the foot of the mountain all this time. Yi Hao had never left the mountain, and no one had entered. They didn't understand how Yi Hao knew about this. And from the looks of it, Yi Hao didn't seem anxious at all. Could it be that Master is really going to abandon our empires? The Fire Emperor and Emperor Sun asked uncertainly. Don't worry, your empires are my people. I won't hurt them, and I won't abandon them. Your subordinates wouldn't dare. Hearing Yi Hao's words, the two of them were taken aback. They didn't expect Yi Hao to be able to see through their thoughts. However, with Yi Hao's words, they felt more at ease. Although they had already sided with Yi Hao, they still had their own people. However, he still had feelings for the people of Dynasty. He could not bear to see them being abandoned. Master, now that we brought them here, what should we do? The Fire Emperor was still worried as he asked. Wait. Yi Hao said another word. Wait. Are we going to wait for the Little Heaven Alliance to come knocking on our door? Although the two of them were thinking this, they didn't dare to ask. One had to know that the first round of the grand ceremony was for each of the 10 empires to send their own troops to defend their own territories or to attack and occupy other territories. Of course, this wouldn't happen in the real world. There would be a secret realm. The secret realm would simulate the territories of the 2 empires. If one side lost, they would lose a large amount of dragon power and their territories in the real world. The winning side would gain a large amount of dragon power and the losing side's territories in the real world. Furthermore, in the secret realm, no lives would be lost. Of course, there were people who didn't follow the rules in the past. They lost in the secret realm. However, in the real world, they weren't willing to give up their territories. The outcome would be very tragic, because if they lost in the secret realm, their dragon power would be greatly reduced, and the people would be disillusioned. The internal structure of the country would be shaken, and it would be torn apart. In the end, the country would be swallowed up by the other empires and would be at death's door. In the worst-case scenario, the country would be destroyed. If these 19 empires were to join forces to fight against 2 empires, wouldn't that be a total defeat? However, when they saw Yi Hao's confident expression, they couldn't understand where Yi Hao got his courage from. Yi Hao looked at the sky and kept his furnace. It was almost time. Are our soldiers ready? Yi Hao asked the Fire Emperor and Emperor Sunday. They are ready. The Fire Emperor and Emperor Zhou nodded their heads. The grand ceremony was a huge event. Even if Yi Hao didn't instruct them, the soldiers would have already been prepared. Get ready to move out. Yi Hao spoke. Yi Hao led the Fire Emperor and the rest, and flew for tens of kilometers before they saw a huge golden door which exuded an ancient aura. The golden door kept flashing with golden light, but it was still tightly shut. At this moment, there were thousands upon thousands of golden doors in the grand ceremony. In front of each door, there were people dressed in yellow robes. It could be said that the people standing in front of the golden door were the rulers of their respective empires. At this moment, Yi Hao saw the words Fire Empire written on the golden door. Behind it, the names of the empires were grayed out. This meant that these empires had already forfeited. Chapter 469. These names belonged to the Little Heaven Alliance, which was the enemy of the Fire Empire. Rumble. Suddenly, lightning flashed and thunder roared in the sky. Bolts of lightning danced in the sky like silver dragons. It was about to begin. Everyone knew that the Myriad Kingdom ceremony was about to begin. Boom! Suddenly, an explosion could be heard in the sky as rays of golden light shot down. The golden light was blinding, and everyone couldn't help but close their eyes, not daring to look at the sky. The Myriad Kingdom ranking. The Myriad Kingdom ranking would only appear during the Myriad Kingdom Grand Ceremony to show everyone. It had always been circulating in the Myriad Kingdom continent. If one wanted to know how many kingdoms there were in the Myriad Kingdom continent, one could just look at the Myriad Kingdom ranking. The Myriad Kingdom ranking included all the kingdoms and powers in the Myriad Kingdom continent. The Myriad Kingdom ranking was split into 10 rankings, which were Divine Kingdom ranking, Holy Kingdom ranking, Empire ranking, Imperial Dynasty ranking, Revered Dynasty ranking, Spiritual Dynasty ranking, Marquee ranking, Public ranking, and the lowest ranking, Wild ranking. The Wild ranking was for the most powerful kingdoms in the Myriad Kingdom continent. As long as one had the Imperial Jade Seal, one had the strength of a dragon, and one city, one could be listed on the Wild ranking. The Wild ranking was so densely packed that it made one dizzy. This was because there were too many wild subordinate kingdoms, too many to count. Even at the Revered Dynasty ranking, the number of kingdoms on the ranking was still densely packed. It was only at the Imperial Dynasty ranking that the situation became better. However, at a glance, there were close to 10,000 empire-level countries. At the Imperial Dynasty ranking, there were only 800 kingdoms left. At the Imperial Dynasty ranking, there were only 53 kingdoms left. At the Divine Kingdom ranking, there were only 4 kingdoms. Yi Hao looked at the Myriad Kingdom ranking in the sky, and his heart was filled with shock. Although he knew that the Myriad Kingdom continent was vast and filled with resources, there were many kingdoms and powers. However, after looking at the Myriad Kingdom ranking, Yi Hao finally understood how terrifying the Myriad Kingdom continent was. Just the wild subordinate kingdoms alone were innumerable. How many people were there? However, when Yi Hao looked at the Divine Kingdom ranking, he realized that it was covered with a layer of golden fog. Although it was only a layer of fog, Yi Hao realized that he looked down on what was written on the Divine Kingdom ranking. Fire Emperor, do you know which country is on the God Nation rankings? Yi Hao asked the Fire Emperor. The Fire Emperor looked at the Divine Kingdom rankings as well before shaking his head. The powers on the Divine Kingdom rankings belong to divine tier powers. People like us wouldn't be able to find out about them. Hearing the Fire Emperor's words, Yi Hao frowned. Could it be that no one has ever seen the God Nation rankings? According to what I know, there has never been such a case. The Fire Emperor shook his head once again. At this moment, Yi Hao finally understood why God-grade factions were so mysterious to the people of the Myriad Kingdom continent. After all, even the Myriad Country Great Ceremony, one couldn't know their names. If this wasn't a mystery, then there wouldn't be any mystery left. However, he knew that there were a total of 4 God-ranked forces in the Myriad Kingdom continent. This was also a precaution for Yi Hao. At the very least, he knew how many top forces there were in the Myriad Kingdom continent. This would allow him to be prepared. Rumble. Suddenly, the golden door in front of him slowly opened. "Let's go in," Yi Hao said to the crowd. The Fire Emperor took out the Imperial Jade Seal of the Fire Empire. The Imperial Jade Seal floated above the golden door, and several figures appeared on it. Yi Hao looked over and realized that the figures were all neatly dressed soldiers. These soldiers had already imbued their auras into the Imperial Jade Seal before the battle began. As long as the Myriad Country Great Ceremony started, no matter where these soldiers were, they would be teleported into the secret realm. After Yi Hao saw this, he took out his own Imperial Jade Seal as well. Following which, Yi Hao's Imperial Jade Seal floated below the Fire Emperor's Imperial Jade Seal, proving that Yi Hao was assisting the Fire Emperor in battle. If Yi Hao didn't do so, with Yi Hao's status, the secret realm would automatically block Yi Hao from entering. This was what he knew from the Fire Emperor and Emperor Sunday. With regards to this point, Yi Hao was extremely surprised. He didn't understand why the secret realm was so mysterious and powerful. Not only could it automatically assign people to different camps, it could also assign people to different battlefields. It could also simulate everything that happened in the Myriad Country continent and could even teleport all the soldiers into the secret realm. Furthermore, the secret realm was separated into countless different areas. Only people from 2 opposing camps could appear in the same secret realm. 114? What does this mean? Yi Hao looked at the numbers below his Fire Dragon Empire and was puzzled. The Fire Emperor saw that Yi Hao was puzzled and immediately explained. It turned out that the number 14 represented the Fire Dragon Empire's Imperial Jade Seal. In order to enter the secret realm, one had to possess the Imperial Jade Seal. This Imperial Jade Seal was extremely valuable. One Imperial Jade Seal could bring one person into the secret realm. The Fire Dragon Empire only had 14 Imperial Jade Seals. This meant that including Yi Hao, they could bring a total of 14 people into the secret realm. Yi Hao looked at the Imperial Jade Seal and saw that the Imperial Jade Seal had offered 10,214,100 Imperial Jade Seals. So much Imperial Jade Seals? Yi Hao asked uncertainly. "Master, an Imperial Jade Seal requires 10 million Imperial Jade Seals to become a true Imperial Jade Seal. I'm already at the edge of becoming an Imperial Jade Seal. If I lose, I'll be demoted." The Fire Emperor laughed bitterly. 10 million Imperial Jade Seals to become an Imperial Jade Seal. Yi Hao looked at his Imperial Jade Seal and saw that his Imperial Jade Seal wasn't even worth a fraction of the Imperial Jade Seal. He couldn't help but blush. He had thought that his 14 points of Imperial Jade Seal was already very good. But now, it seemed like he was just a pitiful beggar. Thinking about how Emperor Zhou had lost 4 points of Imperial Jade Seal and looked like he was about to die, Yi Hao couldn't help but sigh at how petty Emperor Zhou was. However, Yi Hao felt relieved. Regardless of whether it was the Fire Empire's dragon power or the Great Sun Empire's dragon power, they would eventually belong to him. "Emperor Sun, how much do you have?" Yi Hao guessed that since the Fire Emperor had 10 million Imperial Jade Seals, Emperor Sun shouldn't be too far behind. When Emperor Sun heard Yi Hao's words, he immediately took out his Imperial Jade Seal. The Imperial Jade Seal immediately floated to the bottom of the Imperial Jade Seal. However, it was placed in front of the Fire Dragon Empire. 31,953,123. Yi Hao looked at the numbers below the Imperial Jade Seal and couldn't help but be shocked. He had expected the Imperial Jade Seal to be slightly stronger than the Imperial Jade Seal. However, he didn't expect the Imperial Jade Seal to be so much stronger than the Imperial Jade Seal. This was 3 times the Imperial Jade Seal's Imperial Jade Seal. Although the Imperial Jade Seal's Imperial Jade Seal wasn't considered outstanding, it wasn't too bad either. Even in an ordinary faction, the Imperial Jade Seal's Imperial Jade Seal could still be considered as an Imperial Jade Seal. Looking at the numbers behind the Imperial Jade Seal's name, the Fire Emperor opened his eyes wide and his face was filled with envy. However, he still felt a lingering fear. According to the Imperial Jade Seal of the Imperial Jade Seal, it meant that the Imperial Jade Seal was at least 3 times stronger than the Imperial Jade Seal. It wouldn't be easy for the Imperial Jade Seal to deal with the Imperial Jade Seal. If it wasn't for Yi Hao's appearance, the Imperial Jade Seal would have been destroyed by the Imperial Jade Seal. Chapter 470. I don't know either. Emperor Sun shook his head. He only knew that Zi Xing had a strong background, but he didn't know her identity. Emperor Sun then pointed to the God Kingdom rankings. But I'm guessing that she's from there. It can't be. The Fire Emperor was shocked. That should be right. Yi Hao said. He knew that the Purple Sky God Kingdom had a martial god as a servant. That meant that they were at least at the level of a Saint dynasty. However, when he looked around, he didn't see any sign of the Purple Sky God Kingdom in the rankings. At this moment, everyone in the 10,000 Kingdoms continent looked up at the 10,000 Kingdoms rankings in the sky. This was because they could at least see the situation in the 10,000 Kingdoms continent and observe the situation in their own countries. And this is weird. In one of the countries in the Little Heaven Alliance, all the citizens were carefully observing the situation in the Little Heaven Alliance. After all, the Little Heaven Alliance's victory or defeat would affect their future. Whether their lives would be better or worse depended on whether they won or lost. If the Little Heaven Alliance won, their living conditions would be better and their countries would be stronger. This was very beneficial to them. However, if the Little Heaven Alliance lost, they might have to accept the baptism of war and become slaves of a conquered country. Hence, they were all very nervous. What's wrong? The people around the person who exclaimed immediately asked, Quick, look at the Little Heaven Alliance's battle rankings. The person exclaimed excitedly. The people around him looked at the battle rankings in confusion and quickly found the Little Heaven Alliance's battle rankings. Everyone was also stunned and rubbed their eyes in disbelief. Did I see wrongly? Everyone asked at the same time. The Little Heaven Alliance had a total of 10 empires and 9 other empires supporting them. Looking at the Little Heaven Alliance's battle rankings, there was only 1 Fire Empire and 2 other empires supporting them. As for the Fire Dragon Empire, they only had 14 points of dragon power. Was that a joke? The difference between the 2 empires was huge. As long as one wasn't a fool, one would be able to tell who was stronger and who was weaker. Ha ha ha! The Little Heaven Alliance will definitely win this time. The citizens of the countries in the Little Heaven Alliance's battle rankings laughed excitedly. I want to know who the Fire Empire offended. Why is there only 1 country left? Who cares? This is a free victory. For us, this is a great thing. That's right. Our Little Heaven Alliance will sweep through the entire Fire Empire and turn them into chickens and dogs. Hee hee, with just 2 dynasties, they want to deal with our Little Heaven Alliance? If it were me, I would just admit defeat and not embarrass myself. In the camp of the Little Heaven Alliance, the people of all countries were talking about it. As for Yi Hao's Fire Dragon Empire, they completely ignored it. After all, they wouldn't be interested in a country that only had 14 dragon power points. It was probably just a marquee kingdom, and that would be enough. At this moment, not only the Small Heaven Alliance, but the entire Myriad Kingdom continent was in an uproar. What followed was a wave of mocking laughter and envious voices. This Fire Empire is too hilarious. Even at this point, they still refuse to surrender. Do they really think they have a chance of winning? I'm dying of laughter. They're simply seeking their own humiliation. However, I really admire the courage of the Fire Empire. No, let me laugh for a while. However, I'm envious of the Little Heaven Alliance. They won effortlessly. They gained 40 million dragon power points for nothing. However, this is the first time in history that there has been such a huge disparity in strength. I remember that there was only 1,000 Emperor. He seemed to be at a disadvantage and turned defeat into victory. At the mention of 1,000 Emperor, everyone fell silent. This was because 1,000 Emperor was a legendary existence in the Myriad Kingdom continent. Countless martial artists regarded 1,000 Emperor as their goal and worshipped him. However, there were also many people who were disdainful of 1,000 Emperor. This was because 1,000 Emperor was famous for killing. Only by killing countless opponents and killing countless hostile forces would one be able to civilize the continent. It was said that the number of corpses killed by 1,000 Emperor was enough to form a mountain of corpses. He had even declared that he would unify the entire Myriad Kingdom continent. However, such an existence had suddenly disappeared. Countless people thought that 1,000 Emperor must have met an existence that he couldn't afford to offend. Before 1,000 Emperor became famous, he had also become famous through the Myriad Kingdom ceremony. At that time, 1,000 Emperor was also the emperor of an emperor force. In that battle, he was also outnumbered. There were a total of 5 forces in 1,000 Emperor's camp. 1,000 Emperor's force was at the bottom at that time. However, 1,000 Emperor's enemy force had 10 forces. This was originally a situation where they were bound to lose. However, there was another situation that made things worse. At the beginning of the competition, another force surrendered. In other words, 4 against 10. Sure enough, as everyone expected, when the Battle of the Secret Realm began, everyone watched the battle results on the battle list. 1,000 Emperor's dragon power was crazily decreasing. Soon, the other 3 forces were unable to hold on and immediately chose to surrender. At this time, only 1,000 Emperor's force was left, and 1,000 Emperor's dragon power had dropped to 1 million. If it dropped a little more, 1,000 Emperor's force would drop from the Imperial level to the Spirit level force. This was extremely cruel for a country that had painstakingly advanced to the Imperial level. This was like a multimillionaire being reduced to a millionaire. Just when everyone thought that 1,000 Emperor was going to surrender, no one thought that 1,000 Emperor's force name would suddenly turn black. At that time, everyone was wondering if 1,000 Emperor had been beaten silly. This was because when a name turned black, it meant that the 2 sides would start a war until one side died. In the Secret Realm, one side had to die to end the war. If one side knelt down and surrendered, the other side had to agree to it. Otherwise, the war would not end, and only one side would be left. It could be said that 1,000 Emperor's action had shocked the entire world. However, it was followed by a wave of ridicule. After all, the 4 countries' forces had been beaten until they only had 1 million dragon power left. Against the 10 countries' forces, they still dared to start a war until one side died. This was purely an act of seeking death. Soon, 1,000 Emperor's opposing force also agreed to fight until one side died. After all, this was a free 1 million dragon power. Only a fool would not want it. Soon, 1,000 Emperor's 1 million dragon power was rapidly decreasing. In an instant, it dropped below 100,000. Just when everyone thought that this dramatic battle was about to end, 1,000 Emperor's dragon power suddenly stopped at 30,000. Just when everyone thought that 1,000 Emperor was going to kneel down and beg for mercy, they realized that 1,000 Emperor's dragon power had begun to increase rapidly. In an instant, it broke through 1 million, then 10 million, and finally 100 million. Chapter 471. I don't know either. Emperor's son shook his head. He only knew that Zi Xing had a strong background, but he didn't know her identity. Emperor's son then pointed to the God Kingdom rankings. But I'm guessing that she's from there. It can't be. The Fire Emperor was shocked. That should be right. Yihao said. He knew that the Purple Sky God Kingdom had a martial god as a servant. That meant that they were at least at the level of a saint dynasty. However, when he looked around, he didn't see any sign of the purple sky god kingdom in the rankings. At this moment, everyone in the 10,000 Kingdoms continent looked up at the 10,000 Kingdoms rankings in the sky. This was because they could at least see the situation in the 10,000 Kingdoms continent and observe the situation in their own countries. This is weird. In one of the countries in the Little Heaven Alliance, all the citizens were carefully observing the situation in the Little Heaven Alliance. After all, the Little Heaven Alliance's victory or defeat would affect their future. Whether their lives would be better or worse depended on whether they won or lost. If the Little Heaven Alliance won, their living conditions would be better and their countries would be stronger. This was very beneficial to them. However, if the Little Heaven Alliance lost, they might have to accept the baptism of war and become slaves of a conquered country. Hence, they were all very nervous. What's wrong? The people around the person who exclaimed immediately asked, "Quick, look at the Little Heaven Alliance's battle rankings." The person exclaimed excitedly. The people around him looked at the battle rankings in confusion and quickly found the Little Heaven Alliance's battle rankings. Everyone was also stunned and rubbed their eyes in disbelief. Did I see wrongly? Everyone asked at the same time. The Little Heaven Alliance had a total of 10 empires and 9 other empires supporting them. Looking at the Little Heaven Alliance's battle rankings, there was only one Fire Empire and 2 other empires supporting them. As for the Fire Dragon Empire, they only had 14 points of dragon power. Was that a joke? The difference between the 2 empires was huge. As long as one wasn't a fool, one would be able to tell who was stronger and who was weaker. Ha ha ha! The Little Heaven Alliance will definitely win this time. The citizens of the countries in the Little Heaven Alliance's battle rankings laughed excitedly. I want to know who the Fire Empire offended. Why is there only one country left? Who cares? This is a free victory. For us, this is a great thing. That's right. Our Little Heaven Alliance will sweep through the entire Fire Empire and turn them into chickens and dogs. With just 2 dynasties, they want to deal with our Little Heaven Alliance? If it were me, I would just admit defeat and not embarrass myself. In the camp of the Little Heaven Alliance, the people of all countries were talking about it. As for Yi Hao's Fire Dragon Empire, they completely ignored it. After all, they wouldn't be interested in a country that only had 14 dragon power points. It was probably just a marquee kingdom, and that would be enough. At this moment, not only the Small Heaven Alliance, but the entire Myriad Kingdom continent was in an uproar. What followed was a wave of mocking laughter and envious voices. This Fire Empire is too hilarious. Even at this point, they still refuse to surrender. Do they really think they have a chance of winning? I'm dying of laughter. They're simply seeking their own humiliation. However, I really admire the courage of the Fire Empire. No, let me laugh for a while. However, I'm envious of the Little Heaven Alliance. They won effortlessly. They gained 40 million dragon power points for nothing. However, this is the first time in history that there has been such a huge disparity in strength. I remember that there was only one Thousand Emperor. He seemed to be at a disadvantage and turned defeat into victory. At the mention of Thousand Emperor, everyone fell silent. This was because Thousand Emperor was a legendary existence in the Myriad Kingdom continent. Countless martial artists regarded Thousand Emperor as their goal and worshipped him. However, there were also many people who were disdainful of Thousand Emperor. This was because Thousand Emperor was famous for killing. Only by killing countless opponents and killing countless hostile forces would one be able to civilize the continent. It was said that the number of corpses killed by Thousand Emperor was enough to form a mountain of corpses. He had even declared that he would unify the entire Myriad Kingdom continent. However, such an existence had suddenly disappeared. Countless people thought that Thousand Emperor must have met an existence that he couldn't afford to offend. Before Thousand Emperor became famous, he had also become famous through the Myriad Kingdom ceremony. At that time, Thousand Emperor was also the emperor of an emperor force. In that battle, he was also outnumbered. There were a total of 5 forces in Thousand Emperor's camp. Thousand Emperor's force was at the bottom at that time. However, Thousand Emperor's enemy force had 10 forces. This was originally a situation where they were bound to lose. However, there was another situation that made things worse. At the beginning of the competition, another force surrendered. In other words, 4 against 10. Sure enough, as everyone expected, when the Battle of the Secret Realm began, everyone watched the battle results on the battle list. Thousand Emperor's dragon power was crazily decreasing. Soon, the other 3 forces were unable to hold on and immediately chose to surrender. At this time, only Thousand Emperor's force was left, and Thousand Emperor's dragon power had dropped to 1 million. If it dropped a little more, Thousand Emperor's force would drop from the imperial level to the spirit level force. This was extremely cruel for a country that had painstakingly advanced to the imperial level. This was like a multimillionaire being reduced to a millionaire. Just when everyone thought that Thousand Emperor was going to surrender, no one thought that Thousand Emperor's force name would turn black. At that time, everyone was wondering if Thousand Emperor had been beaten silly, because when a name turned black, it meant that the 2 sides would start a war until one side was dead. It would only end when one side was completely annihilated, or one side would kneel down and surrender. However, the other side would have to agree. Otherwise, the war would not end, and only one side would be left. It could be said that Thousand Emperor's action had shocked the entire world. However, it was followed by a wave of ridicule. After all, the 4 countries' forces had been beaten until they only had 1 million dragon power left. To fight against the 10 countries' forces and still dare to fight until one side was dead was purely an act of seeking death. Soon, Thousand Emperor's opposing force also agreed to fight until one side was dead. After all, this was a free 1 million dragon power. Only a fool would not want it. Soon, Thousand Emperor's 1 million dragon power was rapidly decreasing. In an instant, it dropped below 100,000. Just when everyone thought that this dramatic battle was about to end, Thousand Emperor's dragon power suddenly stopped at 30,000. Just when everyone thought that Thousand Emperor was going to kneel down and beg for mercy, they realized that Thousand Emperor's dragon power had begun to increase rapidly. In an instant, it broke through 1 million, then 10 million, and finally 100 million. Chapter 472. Everyone looked at the huge virtual sand table in front of them. On the sand table, there were 3 red dots, which represented Yi Hao's forces. The red dots indicated the number of dragons each country had. Among them, the Fire Empire and Sun Empire were 2 big red dots. At this moment, they were surrounded by more than 10 green dots. Without a doubt, those green dots were their forces. And that little red dot from the Flame Dragon Empire that showed 14 dragon energy was actually at the very edge. This area is a low-level area. No wonder there are only 14 dragons. They actually dared to get involved in the battle of Emperor-level forces. Ha ha, what a joke. Hu Emperor looked in the direction of the Fire Dragon Empire and couldn't help but mock them loudly. This Flame Dragon Empire, who's interested in playing around? Hu Emperor wasn't interested in this small country with only 14 dragons. He couldn't help but ask the crowd. Hu Emperor wasn't interested because he didn't have any contact with Yi Hao. However, Zhou Emperor had. In Zhou Emperor's heart, Qin Shu and Yi Hao were most likely disciples of big forces. That meant that there might be experts protecting him. Zhou Emperor's forces must not go up against Yi Hao. Similarly, the Fire Empire had 5 martial saints. It wasn't easy to go up against them too early. Thinking of this, Zhou Emperor smiled and cupped his fists. Hu Emperor, the Sun Empire is the strongest. Why don't you give it to us? As for the Fire Empire and Fire Dragon Empire, you can play with them as you wish. Let me do the hard work. Hu Emperor narrowed his eyes and looked at Zhou Emperor as if he wanted to see through his thoughts. However, he smiled and said, "All right, it's decided then." Zhou Emperor was delighted and immediately suggested, "Hu Emperor, it wouldn't be good if they surrender. Why don't we just activate fight to the death?" Hu Emperor hesitated because he was afraid that if he activated fight to the death, Yi Hao wouldn't agree and would just give up. That way, the final benefits wouldn't be as great as killing Yi Hao's forces. Hu Emperor, there's no need to be afraid that they won't agree. At most, we could just destroy them in the real world. Zhou Emperor continued to press on. That's right, Hu Emperor. We have so many forces. How can we be afraid of them? If news of this were to spread, wouldn't we become a laughing stock? That's right, Hu Emperor. Activate endless till one dies. There's nothing to worry about. Kill him. What's there to be afraid of? The emperors said. All right then. Seeing that the emperors were in high spirits, the Hu Emperor did not hesitate any longer and immediately transmitted his thoughts to the virtual sand table, following which a layer of black fog covered the sand table. Now, let's see if they dare to agree or not, Hu Emperor said. However, in Hu Emperor's opinion, the chances of Yi Hao agreeing were very small. Unless Yi Hao was a masochist, the Little Heaven Alliance has activated fight to the death. Are they trying to kill us all? The Little Heaven Alliance is being too hasty. Aren't they afraid that the Fire Empire will give up? If I were the Fire Emperor, I'd just admit defeat. This is a fight to the death, isn't it? Seeing the Little Heaven Alliance's name turn black on the battle list, the Myriad Kingdom continent went into an uproar again. This was because when the name turned black, it meant that endless till one dies had been activated. If there was no deep hatred between the two powers, it would not be activated until the very last moment. Once a secret realm was activated, endless till one dies was extremely rare in the Myriad Kingdom continent. After all, this was the Myriad Kingdom continent. The worst that could happen was that they would be demoted and they would still have a chance to win in the future. However, once endless till one dies was activated, it was a different story. It was a fight to the death. Everyone looked at the Fire Empire's name. This was because when they saw the color of the Fire Empire's name, they knew the Fire Empire's decision. However, as long as they did not want it, they would probably choose to give up. At this moment, within the secret realm, Yi Hao looked at the sand table in front of him. Suddenly, a layer of black fog appeared on the sand table. Yi Hao frowned, not understanding what was happening. The Fire Emperor was enraged. This is too much. This is too much. They're trying to kill us all. Emperor Sun's expression wasn't good as well. He looked at Yi Hao and said, Master, let's give up. They have activated endless till one dies. Endless till one dies? Yi Hao didn't know much about this secret realm, and thus looked at the two of them. When the two of them saw that Yi Hao didn't understand, they immediately explained. They thought that Yi Hao would be flustered and would choose to give up. However, what they didn't understand was that Yi Hao's face was filled with joy. That's great. The heavens are helping me. The heavens are helping me? What do you mean? The two emperors looked at Yi Hao in puzzlement, not understanding what was going on with Yi Hao. The other party had already activated endless till one dies, and yet Yi Hao was still smiling. The Fire Emperor was starting to suspect that he hadn't explained it clearly enough. Fire Emperor, hurry up and agree. Yi Hao looked as if he was afraid that the Fire Emperor would go back on his word. What? When the Fire Emperor heard Yi Hao's words, he was afraid that he had heard wrongly. However, he quickly replied, Master, please reconsider. Master, please reconsider. Emperor Sun and the other emperors looked at Yi Hao anxiously. After all, the other party had activated endless till one dies. It was obvious that they wanted to kill them and leave no one alive. Everyone could already imagine what would happen once they entered the secret realm. If they didn't activate endless till one dies, they could still surrender at the critical moment. At least they wouldn't be driven to the brink of destruction. However, once they activated endless till one dies, there would be no room for negotiation. Everyone was suspecting that Yi Hao didn't know the importance of the Imperial Dragon energy. Seeing the anxious looks on everyone's faces, Yi Hao couldn't explain himself. Don't worry, I have a way to help us win. Yi Hao didn't have time to explain himself. When everyone heard Yi Hao's words, they looked at each other in dismay. In such a situation, they could still win. If this wasn't boasting, what was it? Master, please reconsider. The Fire Emperor and the others pleaded once more. Because this was a situation where they were bound to lose, they definitely couldn't agree to endless till one dies. If they really agreed to it, they would become the laughing stock of the entire grand ceremony. Because the Fire Emperor was the leader of this competition, only the Fire Emperor could agree to it. If not, Yihao wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. Looking at the Fire Emperor, Yihao immediately used the mind control pill. The Fire Emperor's gaze froze as he stretched out his hand and pointed at the sand table. This time, the black fog on the sand table was even thicker as it enveloped the entire sand table. At this point, the Fire Emperor finally regained his senses. When he saw the changes on the sand table, his face turned ashen. This time, we're really done for, the Fire Emperor said dejectedly. But what could he do? Yihao was his master, and he couldn't blame him. As for Emperor Sun and the other emperors, when they saw this, they wanted to say something but stopped themselves. This was because they couldn't see any hope in this competition. They didn't understand why Yihao would agree to it when they were bound to lose. Could it be that Yihao still had a backup plan? But where was it? Even if a martial god was here, they wouldn't be able to salvage the situation. However, when they looked at Yihao, they realized that Yihao still had a relaxed expression on his face. Crazy. Crazy. This Fire Dynasty is crazy, he thought. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.